acknowledgement, we would like to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Introduction first. I think I'll just do a quick roll call from the site. I won't introduce anyone from CST. There are a couple that are going to help me in doing some demonstrations today, but I'll let them introduce themselves before they present. So if I could get, I wonder, has Dr. Rodrigo been able to join yet? I didn't see her before. Okay, we might check in again in a bit for her. And I don't think I saw Julie or Mona yet. Can you guys, if you guys are on the line, please let me know. Okay. Do we have, I know it's kind of separated out, but we have Allo Navigator representation. I'll start with Val.
Val is just logging in.
Oh, okay, great. And then do we have Sharon on the line?
Sharon won't be joining today, but I'm here, Catherine.
Perfect. Thanks, Catherine. Welcome.
Thanks.
And then do we have Laura?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, welcome. And do we have Nina and Charlie?
Yes, I'm here with Nina as well.
Oh, great. Thank you. Do we have auto and allo assistants?
Kathy's tried to log
I know that,
yeah,
I think they must be logging in.
Okay. Just let us know in the chat, or if you have any struggles, just email Olga. She's on the line here, and she should be the one that sent out the invite. If you have any problems, we can try to help you with connecting if you have trouble. And do we have Allo Navigator and Process Expert Marie?
Yep, I'm here.
Perfect. So just double checking that I didn't miss anyone. Okay, I think in a couple minutes we might just see if Dr. Rodrigo has been able to join yet. On to the next. Okay, so our agenda for today, we've kept it kind of flexible with the understanding that there will have to be quite a bit of discussion in regards to forms, as always. And then we just want to show you, so in between that, we want to show you our proposed workflow, so the start of what we believe your future state workflow to be. And I'm sure there'll be lots of discussion and corrections around that just as we formulate what we know about your workflow and turn it into future state. And then we will chat a little bit more about the positions for each clinician or user that's part of that workflow in system. And then we will also talk about message center pools, and then, as I mentioned, forms. And then we will talk about dynamic work list versus patient lists, which are ways that we can kind of track patients that we are assigned to, that you're assigned to as navigators. And then we have requisition manager, which message center and requisition manager, we did do a demonstration of that in our last session, so my apologies if it was missed, but we will just do a little more digging into what we might need to do in the system to make those usable tools for your team. And then, of course, questions and final discussions. The usual housekeeping items: please do not put the meeting on hold. If you need to step away, please hang up and call us back. Please state your name prior to speaking. This will allow us to record your comments and requests accurately. And as I mentioned before, we hopefully got some permission to record the meeting, but please speak up now if you have any problems. And another one's not mentioned here is if you're not talking, if you could please put yourself on mute. Thank you. The usual guiding principles, I won't spend too much time. I think many of those on the line have probably seen these over and over, but we do focus on safety, any safety, regulatory, financial, and content requirements when it comes to designing within the enterprise system. So purpose and scope of today's session. So we're going to show the we're actually going to show, pardon me, I wanted to change the wording on this. We're going to show the workup and assessment workflow. We are going to show it in a workflow aspect right now, and then the full end-to-end will come at our next design session, just as things get built out and changed around so that we can show how patients will move throughout the spaces. As I said, position suggestions, workflow steps, and forms design proposals. So we're covering from the point in which a patient has been referred to the BMT navigators up until admission or infusion. So as I mentioned, we have these proposed positions. So I'm actually going to make a correction there too. Sorry, I think I have a different slide. For Navigator, we are going to go forward with nurse oncology ambulatory minus registration and scheduling. I think I met with the ALLO navigators last Thursday, and Michelle was there too. And we had a chat with them about what how it's hard to have nursing schedule within Cerner. It's a lot of education. It's a whole kind of different application within Cerner called Chatbook. But then also, if you're not using it often, it's kind of hard to keep up with the changes and keep up with the skill. So we're going to try to make that deviation between Navigator to assistants and coordinators, in which assistants and coordinators can help with scheduling, and navigators can request to schedule, but not necessarily place that patient within an appointment within a Chatbook. Pausing there for any discussion if needed. Okay.
Is this a decision? Sorry, I was just going to say, this is something that can be revisited if we ever needed to change it in any way, right? So, like, makes sense for now. So, okay.
Sorry. And who's speaking?
Oh, sorry, it's Val from the
Val.
Navigators.
No worries. That's a good question. Things can be revisited. It might not be right at go live, but it does take education to go and take the courses and stuff that are the content that's related to scheduling, but it technically can be revisited.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Haley, it's Marie. Just to confirm, because I wasn't in the meeting that you guys had, the request to schedule through the chat book. So the navigator will be able to request to schedule an appointment, and then will the assistant be able to schedule the appointment?
I think that is within discussion for sure. Sorry, it's a bit echoey on your end. It's within the realm of possibility. You can also, like, if you are sending a request to say apheresis, you can include within scheduling comments to be specific on what date you need. And apheresis and say daycare, knowing how time sensitive your requests are that are coming from the Navigator office, they would know how to process those requests.
So just to confirm then, the apheresis unit would have the ability to schedule in appointments, but our navigators or our booking clerks within the Navigator office would not have the ability to schedule appointments?
I think actually, and you see my question there, please list where you currently schedule directly into. So to answer your question, I'm going to ask another question. Who and what, who's scheduled into where currently? Like directly, not just like, so I've seen the LB6 appointments in the booking forms, but my understanding is that daycare or in some instances take that and then plot those patients into times, but there might be instances where they're booked directly. So can you tell me where you're booking directly into?
Those forms are actually just to back up what our assistants have done directly. So our assistants make the appointments, and then they send the forms to let daycare know what has been done.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So assistants are booking directly into daycare and apheresis. ALLO assistants.
Not apheresis. Sorry, apheresis is separate. So.
Okay. Assistants booking into daycare.
Yes.
Okay. Any specific date and time?
Pardon? Sorry?
Specific date and time is that the Saturday and Sundays for GCSF?
No, they book everything. So they book like bone marrow biopsies, lumbar punctures, like anything to do with the workup pre-transplant. And even for the melphalan autos, they'll book the transplants, I think. Anyways,
Okay, that's good to know. And do they have specific times that they are looking into, or are they just finding space within inside of them?
Yeah, Haley, it's Marie again. They have a booking criteria template that was developed by daycare that I'm sure Lori or Kathy would be able to send on to you to show you. But the other place that the Navigator booking clerks book into is the doctor's clinic as well. So just to keep that in mind.
So the Navigators book directly too?
The Navigator assistants or booking clerks, yeah.
Okay. I'm just listing all these here. Doctor's clinic. So to daycare for bone marrow biopsies, auto, LP, based on the booking criteria template. Did you say there's someone that can send that to me?
Yeah,
Lori?
Kathy or Lori should be able to.
Okay, Kathy, do you think you could send that to my way?
Yeah.
Awesome. That'd be so great. That'll help us. Doctor's clinic, anywhere else that you book directly into, the assistants or navigators?
Within BMT? Or outside BMT?
Sorry if I'm hearing that I'm echoing.
Sorry, that was Marie.
They book into like consults for the pharmacist, social worker, all of that, I think, but you have to ask them because I don't actually do that. And I don't know about the lab, like the outpatient lab. Maybe someone can explain.
It's Marie again. So right now, the pharmacist, dietitian, some of the appointments, they're all booked through Accuro Calendar, and it's kind of they're booked as if they're in the doctor's clinic, that kind of idea. And so there is Accuro Calendars for all of those things. The outpatient lab booking system, I'm not, like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that CST Cerner will pair with the outpatient lab booking system because they have a whole separate booking system that we go into.
Okay, I will ask Norma, can you speak to whether we can schedule into the lab at Diamond?
Hi, it's Norma. I wasn't aware that outpatient labs were being booked or scheduled. So I'll need to follow up on how that's happening in current state. So can you confirm, so the patients that are being seen for BMT, they're having like pre-set up scheduled appointments to have their blood work done?
Yes. Again, yeah, that's right. There's a lab booking system that was actually created by our outpatient lab that operates out of Diamond, and there's multiple hospitals that utilize this system now. I can't remember what the actual name of it is, but we can definitely send you the link of the booking system, and we're allowed to pre-book our patients' walk-in appointments.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
It looks like Kathy's already on it and has sent that link. Thanks, Kathy.
Super, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so this is good. Kathy, I see that you said that the secretaries and doctor's clinic are the ones that are booking there, but that I just had asked the question of whether, does that mean that you're requesting those appointments there?
Yeah, I usually task them which date I prefer or which week, and then they find date and time and they contact me.
Okay. And sorry, Maria, I know this might be asking again. Navigator scheduling into spaces only, is that, I heard that was maybe more common if the assistant wasn't around?
Yeah, that's right. Like if it's ideal for the navigators to be able to book this stuff as well. Like, should we go into a shortage where some of the booking clerks are sick, or we just have a shortage in general, then it's good for the navigators to have the ability to book. But whether we do so on a regular basis, it would be probably inconsistent.
Okay. Yeah, I think that what we are, as I mentioned, proposing is not to have directly scheduled, have you guys directly scheduling, but there's always the placement of a request to those spaces, but then also a follow-up, via phone saying I've placed a request and this is really time sensitive. In those kind of less, the less likely instance where you don't have a navigator to help schedule. But I've taken the notes down to where assistants book. So I have into daycare for various things, including bone marrow vaccine, the actual auto infusion, LP, and then also assistants say they request to doctor's clinics. Anything else or any other spaces that we will directly book into? I want to make sure it's set up, right?
Sorry, it's Marie again. Sorry.
No, you're here to talk, please.
The other aspect, and I'm not quite sure how this will work, is how will this Cerner communicate with the Cerner at BC Cancer? Because obviously we current state is we call BC Cancer to book for harvest, but if this Cerner communicates with the BC Cancer Cerner, we potentially would be able to book that directly.
Yeah, so I think this is definitely a possibility for placing that request in system to BC Cancer. It does speak to it in a sense, but we will be focusing on what changes might need to be made to the bone marrow harvest workflow. So we'll try to cover those aspects for what's changing with you guys going live.
I also think, sorry, just to add, it's Michelle, generally with surgery, they still require a booking package that kind of prompts their booking process. So I'm not sure there'd be like a in-order system, but definitely something you can look at, Haley.
That's a good point. Sorry, I didn't think of that. Yeah, you can schedule other places, but usually OR still is paper-based in their request. Thanks, Michelle.
Right, it's Marie again. There is a booking package that we send. Typically, we would send it when we book, but the way that the BC Cancer OR has requested us to do this with the implementation of Cerner is that we call to hold the spot, and then when we have all of our documentation ready for the pre-anesthetic appointment, that's when we send the booking package over. So I guess it would be similar to this, like place a scheduling request, potentially that might work, but we could look at that on another day.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's to come. We've just been trying to work out how to, at what angle to come in and make sure that workflow is covered with both sites live. So this is good to know, and we can take this away for aspects that we maybe need to change. Okay, anywhere else that we're booking directly into? I don't mean to spend too much time on this, but we just want to make sure that you're covered. And anyone from scheduling have any questions before I move on?
This is Martha. I just want to confirm the whole donor workflow.
Right. I dropped that down below. I actually had a question for you guys. Are we scheduling donor assessments into long-term follow-up? I know it's with the GPO. I assume is it Dr. Kayla, and are they usually within long-term follow-up?
Yeah.
Yes.
Current state is that it's booked into the LTFU GPO calendar. That's what the actual name of the calendar is called. And then they hold some spots for us within that calendar, or we can reach out to the physician directly to ask them to book.
Okay. Sounds good. Does that answer your question, Martha? Do you have any other ones?
Nope, that's good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay. So moving on from the positions, we did have present an encounter strategy, which I know was probably really new and interesting and probably hard to grasp in our last session. But either way, we are going to just need to revisit a little bit for encounter strategy. So it's just a nod to that CST Cerner is encounter based, but just that we need to iron out some details in regards to the Navigator location and how it flows into other locations that patients are seeing. And there I asked the question about appointments, donor appointments. Perfect. Any other questions about positions or encounter strategy? Can I ask an odd question for your team? And this is something I feel like I should know, but we know that the whole floor that you guys occupy is kind of BMT offices, but is your kind of Navigator space or scope called anything specific? When people refer to the BMT Navigator office, is that what we call it, or is it just BMT offices and that's where the navigators are located? It might be really high level, but it's going to help us name it.
It's Marie. Technically, I believe, and if there's any managers on, they can correct me. I believe that the area is referred to as like LBMT administrative offices.
Okay.
And we actually only occupy half of the floor that we're on. UBC Department of Medicine occupies the other half.
Oh yeah. Kind of vacuum. Okay. I'll take that down. I'm interested. I'm just still to see what it's named in the system. But just wanted to know. That's great. I'll probably reach out for confirmation, and I'll reach out to Julian on that one too.
Yeah, it might also be called hemadmin, right? Like I think if anyways.
Hemadmin. Okay.
Yeah, hematology admin.
Yep. Perfect. All right. Okay, so I am going to show the start of our of the workflow. I'm going to try to hide some things here. Just to make it cleaner, because as much as we all love Visios, it's nice to make them look as pretty as possible. Just trying to hide things. All right. Oops, not the one I want. Got enough Visios open. Sorry guys, just closed on me. Please hold. Question, was Dr. Rodrigo able to join?
Yes.
Awesome.
Can you hear me?
Welcome. Yes.
Although I think Marie is more in tune with the Navigator needs than I am, to be honest, but I am here.
Fair. And we want to be just in tune with the navigators, and then also with how it interacts with provider and assistants and everyone. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. I'm just waiting. Visio likes to make me wait to load up. So it's a good question, Kathy. You can send the email, even just respond to the invite, just reply to the invite, and that will send it to the right place, or should. Okay. Now this should work. Okay, so probably not the first look at a Visio for you all. It looks, I know, beautiful and wonderful, and there's a lot of red because there's things we need to chat about and decisions to be made. You'll see within that decisions, I'll have a call out saying decision required. Those are going to be talked about within the slide deck. So just know that we have it identified as something that needs discussion for how we can put that into system, if we can put that into system. Otherwise, these are all steps. What we have here are swim lanes. And zooming out a bit, we have the BMT Navigator. This is the start, and then allo. I know we have autos on the line. We are working on your auto workflow but with the understanding that we want to meet with you, and we weren't able to do that before the session, but I think we'll do a follow-up with auto navigators in the next week or so. But understanding that a lot of the functionality that we're going to propose will be the same options for allo versus autos. So hopefully not a loss for you all to be here, because we will definitely need your input. So we have the BMT Navigator, we have the BMT physician, and we understand that that changes, but what we've done is tried to be specific on which provider is completing the steps, whether it's related donor, physician, or recipient physician, et cetera. And then we have the assistants, and then we have the related search coordinator and the unrelated. And then we have some questions to be dealt with or asked after. So have we missed any key players in the clinical workflow for our navigators? It's a big question. None so far? Okay.
So I think that's good.
Thank you. All right, so what we have here is that we have the provider assesses the potential recipient, whether this is in a doctor's clinic appointment or from the inpatient space. And the question as to whether the patient is eligible for transplant is always is there within the appointment. If it's external, the provider will send, and not eligible, the provider will send an out of mandate letter. And you'll see our first instance of a decision required. We will have this sort of discussion on how this can be added into the system. Is patient eligible for transplant? Provider completes the TWRF and recipient HLA and IDM requests. Do you mind if I just request that anyone that's not speaking just mute yourself? Thank you so much. So then at this time, we have the understanding that the TWRF has guidelines and kind of patient handout information, but we typically don't enter that into systems. So those kind of guidelines or recipient handouts, such as the sibling search contact form, the CNS privacy form, those will have to remain in paper and will have to be handed to the recipient at that appointment. So once the provider has done that, we're jumping up to the Navigator swim lane. We have received the TWRF message in Message Center pool. So this is dependent on, again, I've passed one of those wonderful decision required bubbles here. And so we will talk about the options for how to get that TWRF, that kind of request in system. And so that is to come. And with the understanding that the provider would place or write the orders for recipient HLA and IDMs at this time. So moving on here, as I said, we're going to work on the decisions for TWRF. And another decision that will be required that we'll also speak to in the slide deck coming up is pools. So these pools that we can send within Message Center. So it's not just to one specific person, but we can reach out to a larger group of people with one message. So we will discuss how that works. And then the Navigator could message the search coordinator or coordinators, depending what is usual for them, but within Message Center. We have jumped down to the related search coordinator. So I'm just going to scroll. I know it's a lot of scrolling here. Where at this time, once the related search coordinator has received that message from the Navigator in regards to the a new TWRF, that this is the time that a referral encounter could be made in the BMT Navigator's office location. Again, that's what I was asking about naming. We understand this isn't what it's called at this time, so we'll look to see what it's called in the system and reach out if we need some clarification on what we should call it. But then also just call it for the encounter strategy. We'll make sure that that is firmed up before we chat about that. Basically, we'll come up with the best solution for how to move patients from the Navigator through other areas, Navigator's office through other areas and into inpatients. Sorry, I'm just making sure I read my questions here. You know what? I think I answered that for myself. So then there's this option to message Navigator or search coordinators and to notify of encounter creation. So that could be, Nina, that you would create that referral encounter and you could let, say, if it's Marie or whomever you're dealing with, know that, hey, I've created that encounter. And that could be a message in Message Center. And then that would just let them know that they can watch the progress within that encounter in the patient's chart. And then we've got to call it Go ahead. Someone want to say something?
Sorry, Haley, I just had a quick question. Just curious, based on what you're envisioning, are you thinking that the entire search process will be an encounter on its own?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So then potentially physicians or other members in the program would be able to go into that search encounter and see the update as to whether or not donor has been found, etc.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's the same as, so you have the Accuro where anyone can go and access and see where things are at. In Accuro, it would be similar to that in Cerner where one can go and select the encounter. Documentation often crosses encounters, so they could even see documentation that's been completed in regard to it. But yes, a lot of the specifics that are completed would be able to be seen in that encounter. Okay. So we have a question of whether it's an allo, and if it's not, we will pop over to the auto workflow, which would be the next tab. Again, we're going to work on that more with the auto navs just to make sure we've got the details correct. So if it's allo, we have the understanding that Nina would view the message in the message center pool as she did before the encounter creation. And Nina, this is a question for you, and I know this is kind of, I feel like this has likely been answered before, but keeping straight between donors and recipients. When the TWRF is filled out and the recipient has labs collected, are you also arranging for that requisition for those HLAs to immunology and then also for BCCDC for the recipients?
Hi, this is Charlie. Nina just stepped up for a second, but the answer to your question is yes.
Okay. Is that inpatients or outpatients? Anyone? Any HLAs?
Anyone.
Kind of,
yeah, so the immunology requires us to send a booking form before we perform any type of testing.
Yeah, that's what I said. So it's a booking form, and then once the specimens are received, then she'll take the requisition down.
The requisition is usually accompanied with the sample, which is received in immunology.
Okay, so the requisition is sent with the sample even from externally?
Yes.
Okay. I think that I had a different understanding of that, so my apologies. I had thought that there was a booking form, and then she had to walk down and make sure that the appropriate requisitions and specimens were kind of delivered to transfusion medicine and then also to BCCDC.
Yes, I was just referring to the HLA typing. That second step also happens as well.
Okay. I think I combined it all in my head. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And then at this point, we have that the chartlet could be created with a kind of blank donor search form. An interesting request, I would really appreciate it if, I don't know, Charlie, if you could send us a copy of the donor search form. It could be empty, but just want to lay our eyes on it with the understanding that I don't know if we'll be able to get that one in system, but we'd like to have a copy of it just to understand it better. Great. So then moving on, do we have potential related donors? Yes. And so what I'll do is follow along this whole workflow for potential related donors, and then I will drop down to unrelated search, and then we'll go over, again, my apologies for the scrolling. So when sibling calls in, this is when Nina can create the referral encounter. Again, anytime I mention encounter throughout this whole kind of workflow, take it with a grain of salt, we will make sure it's firmed up. And then we have the step for complete consent and preliminary health screen questionnaire. And we do have a decision that we will discuss about in our slide deck. And so scrolling up to, this is the related donor provider will receive the health screen questionnaire. So based on the decision we make, there is a possibility for things to be completed in system and then sent to provider for signature. And so we'll show what that looks like. So then they would sign the health screen questionnaire. And if we were to not proceed with testing, this would lead down to a discharge of referral encounter. I've added this how as we just need to make sure that this is within the assistant swim lane. So just want to make sure that we cover how the assistants will know to discharge referral encounters. There's nothing really wrong with leaving a referral encounter open. It's just that it will be open until someone discharges it.
Is there a reason it would be the assistants? Because it seemed to me like the search should all be done by the search team. Like, wouldn't they do the discharge referral encounter? Like,
yeah, there's no reason, and I think that's choose your own adventure on that one. So if we recommend for this to be done by the search coordinators, I'm happy to do that.
okay. I don't know what everyone else thinks, but yeah.
Sounds good. It sounds like it's a good suggestion. No one's got any complaints about that, so I'll keep moving on. Thank you for that. All right, then proceed with testing. And so we've said yes. So then this is where we have gone up to the Navigator lane. We do have a decision out there where navigators under a physician directive could enter HLA and IDM orders. However, we do have the question of whether this would be it's kind of 6 and 1.5 dozen in the other, and they're fairly quick order entry for providers. So I guess our question would be, if that related donor provider is already doing that screening, would it be just as simple for them to place that short amount of orders? Or do we leave it for the navigators to place orders within the system?
Like right now.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
On you go, it's fine.
I was just going to say that right now we just take that as an order on the TWRF, so the search team just goes with it, but we actually have to have somebody actually place those orders now, right? Like for every donor and every patient?
Yeah, it's kind of,
okay.
Yeah, we understand that Acuro, you could kind of hold those already completed requisitions and would place the patient's name on them. In this instance, we already have, and I'm going to let Joanne, I probably had a really good thing to add here, so I'll let her speak to kind of order sets, but it could be just as simple as placing those.
What about our search team? Would they be able to place those too? Do you have to be like a
you would have to be a nurse or doctor. Nurse is already kind of, we have, it's kind of flexible and gray area on our scope for that, but yes, it would have to be nurse or doctor.
I think it would be hard to have the physicians do every single one, so I think we'd have to look at it being the navigators, but I don't know, everyone else might have I just think there's going to be a lot, right? Because some people have like 10 siblings, so
okay.
I don't know what everyone else thinks. Like we just would message that to the donor search physician and they would place those orders, or what we would do. But anyways, okay.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Val. I think a lot of the labs are going to come in and there's going to be too many, I think, for the physicians to be putting in those ad hoc orders. Plus, there's a lot of orders that you can place that are kind of time sensitive as well. So I think there has to be a waiver for navigators to actually input their own lab orders.
Right. I think Joanne, are you picturing at least the initial search for that to be not ad hoc but power plan?
For the initial HLA typing and infectious disease markers and the group and screening stuff that you're talking about?
Yeah. Okay,
we did something similar for a pediatric BMT where I had a power plan for sort of initial donor workup that had everything on there. So it was pretty easy to place. And as you know, with those plans, the pediatric navigator was able to put in those plans, but I know there's still that outstanding decision for adult BMT. So
definitely, I think the physicians would just cause a delay in workflow if you have physicians having to enter these. I think the navigators really should be able to do as much as possible.
Yeah, sounds good. Then I'll keep it in the nav lane. I see questions in the chat, but also someone was trying to talk. Just want to make sure I'm accounting for everyone. Maria, I see your question about the sibling will have their own file referral encounter where we will place the orders. I don't know, can you hear me? I might be on mute if you're going to talk. Okay. Everyone else can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone else have any or want to speak to Marie's question there? Or maybe if she comes back to us, we'll also...
It's Val again, sorry. I actually had the same question. I was thinking if we created that referral encounter for the sibling, does that automatically create a chart for them, or like, does somebody also create a chart at the same time, or like
that is the chart? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I was wondering.
No worries. That's a good question. Yeah. Encounter is once you have an encounter within PowerChart, you're able to chart that it's linked with the patient's PHN and this.
Now,
Yeah.
and even for the siblings, because some of them are overseas and things, right? But that would still be okay.
It randomly assigns them a PHN. If they don't
right.
exist in the system, you can create them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, good questions.
Hi, it's Norma from Lab. I just had a question going back to the immunology orders and the booking form. Would that happen when the provider's placing the orders? Is that they would send that booking form and then the requisition once it's been approved and then the specimens are collected?
You mean the booking form, Norma, that's attached to the HLA order in Cerner? Is that the booking form you're talking about?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, in the future state, would the navigator would be placing the HLA screening order, sending that booking form, but then not actually collecting the specimen until it's been approved. Is that correct?
Trying to show the picture of the form.
Yeah, right down at the bottom. There we go.
Yeah.
So this booking form is usually only sent. Sorry, this is Charlie. Booking form is usually sent after the fact that immunology receives the samples, and then they'll request a booking form from us.
I think that's current state, but future state, I think the orderable would have to be put into Cerner for HLE typing. And when you're placing the orderable, the form has to be filled in at the same time.
Sure.
Right, Norma?
Yeah, I was just wondering on the timing of that, and then like the specimen collection, you mentioned that a requisition would go with it. Is that a different requisition that you're sending along with the specimen then?
It really depends on whether this is we're talking about the recipient or the donor.
Okay, if it was the recipient.
If it's the recipient, then at this stage, the physician orders it on the TWRF. So we wouldn't know whether the samples are in the lab or not.
Okay.
This is until the sample arrives in immunology, then immunology requests the booking form from us.
For recipients.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Okay. But once we have donors to be collected, we send the booking form ahead of time.
That's right. Because we're the one who initiated the donor testing, right?
That makes sense. Thanks, Charlie.
Whereas the recipient, we don't initiate that type of testing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Norma. Marie, you've asked a good question. I had not heard of how we can link patients with other kind of patients. We're in the system, we're kind of treating the potential donors as patients. I don't know if there's anyone from our registration team or anyone else on my team that wants to add anything to
that. Haley, it's Kate. That's only possible so far in the system with babes, newborns, being linked to the mom's chart. But that's for very specific purposes, and charting is done on both throughout the journey. So
that's a good point, Kate. And so for a short and maybe not great answer, Marie, for this instance, no. But it's a good question. Is it a full, are you able to do that with an Acuro linked chart?
No, I don't think so. At this time, we don't.
Okay.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. Does anyone know if there's guidelines into creating these donor encounters in terms of, I'm kind of thinking that for a lot of these sibling donors, you don't really do anything with them apart from do this blood work, and then the blood work comes back, and then obviously it gets reviewed and you figure out who the donor is going to be. But then if they're not chosen, that's it. Right?
Yes.
So
we still keep that information in the patient's chart.
Yeah.
We don't, that donor will have a chart, but we keep the information on how many SIBs were tested and all of that sibling information and results as a package in Accuro in the patient's chart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to join the mention of how they keep the charts in case it ever down the line that sibling would be another choice down the line. But other than that, you're right.
Do we need to worry about, like, I know, so samples will still be coming to the lab from outside labs or, even mailed from other countries and going through accessioning and then ending up in the fridge in immunology. And then we will create the requisitions and sort of accession the samples again ourselves. Is that still okay? This is for donors and sometimes for patient samples.
I think I'm going to ask Norma, from your perspective, lab, in case anyone hasn't noticed, Norma's the lab guru here.
So if I can just reiterate, you said that in current state you have specimens that are arriving from out of country, out of province from the donors, and you're accessioning those. Are you accessioning them, or did you mean the lab?
Sorry, they just say to go to immunology. So I think the lab just sends them to immunology, and then they know they're for us, so they wait for us in a rack in the fridge, and then we can bring the requisitions and pair them up. So.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't foresee that changing in the future, but I can verify with the lab leads that will remain in place.
And I think so we'll be able with Cerner to print those requisitions, right? Not necessarily, anyways. Well, there'll just be a form, I guess.
Yeah, I think right what might happen, Val, is the order sets that I create, that as long as they're built properly, they will spit out a requisition. And then those requisitions can then be similar to what you do now. Those requisitions can be paired up with the samples that are kept in the immunology fridge, and then you can then put it into the CDC bucket and the whatever buckets you need to. So that workflow stays the same, but the difference is I guess that there'll be order sets that'll need to be entered with actual Cerner orderables, so it gets done properly in the system, and that you'll still pair them up.
Okay, that sounds good. Good, thanks.
Perfect. I was just trying to tell Marie, if you're on the line, you can try to call in on your phone. Sometimes the audio is better if you're still having trouble. Okay, thank you all. Good discussion, and thank you, Joanne and Norma. Really appreciate it. So we've gone forward with the idea that or the action that the Navigators will take and putting the initial donor HLA and IDM orders in. And so we will move forward on, we do have a ticket out there that we have kind of we've had discussion with professional practice, but that just because it has to be kind of, it does have to be approved in a sense from a professional practice standpoint, which we think as long as there is a physician directive such as that TWRF in the system, we should be covered. So more to come on that discussion. And with the understanding that there's been discussions within the program, especially within the physician offices, doctor's offices, in regards to external orders outside of the VPP, so outside of CSG Cerner, could still be placed within Accuro. So that is something that we would likely need to understand from a Navigator perspective, which I think we've been, it's been made pretty clear that Accuro allows for the faxing out of requisitions more easily than Cerner, but just presenting that as a discussion that's already been had at doctors' offices.
Are you good?
Go ahead.
Sorry, it's Marie. Are you guys able to hear me, just to make sure?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good. Sorry, I've been trying to fix this, but just to backtrack a little bit and to scaffold off of what you just said, because one of the big parts of this HLA IDM orders, like we can enter them into Cerner to trigger the testing within our VGH and CDC facilities. But in some cases, we're actually generating a requisition for that blood work to be drawn out of country, other areas of the province. And usually we fax from Accuro in order to do that, or potentially print to PDF in order to email it to the person. I'm just wondering what the capabilities will be for that, or whether this is one of those things where we'll have to keep a form off Cerner to be able to be used. Just try to figure out a workaround if Cerner doesn't have the capability to fax to other clinics.
Right. So the form of the requisitions that you send out externally is fairly generic in collection. Am I right that it has, draw, I think, 3 EDTA tubes? Is this the one that you typically send out for blood?
Yeah, that's right. It has various, tick boxes and things that we can indicate what we want. And then the most important aspect of it is that it has the delivery instructions for delivering the blood back to VGH in order for it to be accessioned properly, and it ends up in the immunology lab for Nina to accession it from there. So it's a bit of a rigmarole process at the moment, but it works. So yeah, just trying to figure out how this is going to make that process change, I guess, going forward. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, I think unless Norma has anything to add at this point, maybe we can make sure that we'll catch up offline and make sure that we've got this ironed out for a future state, in a sense. Unless Norma, do you have anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I'm thinking, is the plan to keep this form in FormsFest or somewhere where it can be printed out?
That is definitely, I think, a possibility.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that may be a good idea. Yeah, because I think it is so important for that sticker thing to be there about delivering it to immunology, and we never used to have those. And back in my day when I was a Navigator, before we instituted this process, so many samples went missing and were not delivered to immunology, and it was just super messy. So certainly with these requisitions, most of the time it goes pretty smoothly.
Yeah, my only thing is with and again, we can chat a little bit more about this with the form fast, is that then we have this paper form and they usually email it, and they're not what they were saying before, and Navigator can correct me if I'm wrong, is that right now a lot of those faxing numbers are saved somewhere, and the actual manual faxing is saved in Accuro. You're right. Yeah. And the actual faxing of the paper form might become a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? I love using the word arduous, but more arduous process.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of things that we need to look at with the switch to Cerner, because it has the potential to increase workload and decrease kind of a natural flow of this process because of the need to manually fax. So if we can maybe brainstorm some ideas around that, I think it would be really helpful.
Yeah, we have done some of our kind of background, what's the word looking for? Info checks. The discussion, and I don't want to use the word decision, but the discussion has been had in regards to BMT spaces utilizing Accuro for orders external to the DPP, so external to CST Cerner. So while we can present all the options that Cerner can allow, one of the things is that it doesn't fax out for you. In so many words, it will not fax out for you. So with the understanding that some BMT spaces have gone with a kind of split in the sense that they'll be using Accuro for external orders.
Yeah,
go ahead, Marie.
Yeah, it's going to be a discussion of pros and cons, I think, going forward, just because, obviously Acura does cost us money, whereas Cerner will be something that's part of the health authority. I'm hopeful that we keep Acura for the ease of things, but I'm just curious, and whether or not you guys have looked into this or not yet, what is the community planning on doing, like for the community health centers?
Great question. I don't have any connection or knowledge of the community centers, to humbly say. Does anyone on my team have an answer to that one?
Are you talking about like Paris system? Because they're still using Paris in the community at this time.
In conjunction with Cerner, or like, is that the plan? Or
I don't believe community is going on to Cerner at this time. That was my understanding.
I think you're right. That was my thought, Michelle. I didn't want to speak to it. Cerner's kind of focused to more acute sites.
Yeah.
Well, I think they just paid. To be honest, they just paid for an upgrade with Paris not long before, so that was part of the decision making in that. So maybe eventually in the future, but that hasn't been like a defined scope to our understanding yet.
It's a good question.
Fair enough. I thought that potentially we could do the same thing.
Yeah.
Going to continue doing different for a little bit.
For sure, yeah. It takes time before everyone gets on board. Definitely seeing that slowly, though.
Okay. Yeah. So so I think what we're hearing is it's likely that navigators will have to move forward for ease of of process to move forward with external ordering within Acura because of the risk to increase steps and slow down the pace. Is that what I'm hearing?
Just talking about the search part of it so far, right? Like whether that's easier to do in Acura.
I think so. Even search, as we know, like what we're hearing is that the search can be extended to out of province and out of country. So the reason I asked here, and it would hopefully be kind of a statement that would carry throughout the workflow, because to have one process in Cerner for some external orders and one process out. I don't know if anyone on my team has anything to add to that, but we'd want to make sure we don't confuse things by having too many options and differences in where we're entering orders. But why don't we think on that, and we can chat about it more to come. Just knowing that we will need to finalize. We'll have to start finalizing workflow and validating things upcoming up really quickly. So, but we can definitely carry on the conversation at a later date. So once those orders are added into systems, so Charlie, you asked for a clarification on these orders. This would be the HLA and IDM orders for potential donors, and we are in the Navigator swim lane.
And what was the box directly preceding enter HLA?
That would be the related donor provider received the housekeeping questionnaire and signed it and has decided to proceed with testing.
That's perfect, thanks.
No worries. Okay. So once those HLA and IDM orders are entered, we can message the related search coordinator and let them know. Jumping all the way down, receives Navigator message, prints requisitions, and sends potential donor buccal swabs if applicable. We've added a mention of requisition manager. It was demoed before, but we'll have a little more discussion about it today if we have time. And then later on, as results received, we can receive those HLA results via fax from immunology is the plan, even in the future. IDMs, I'm just going to add a little note for IDMs. Those will result in Care Connect. So you will be able to see those in system. And as we know, it just repeats per family, sibling, family member, so we have an arrow dropping back to the beginning of that sibling process. Any questions for the sibling process?
Sorry, I didn't see who receives the Navigator message, or where does it come from? Sorry.
The Navigator sends the message
from
Message Center.
Okay, once we've ordered things, then we would let the search team know.
Yeah.
Okay.
They can also know just to monitor. That could be a workflow decision between your team.
Yeah, they're usually better at letting us know, so this will be a different, this will be a change. So.
If they're yeah, it'll be a bit of a change just because those orders have to be placed within the system. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for pointing that out. It's good to point out where things will change and stay the same. So that being the related donors workflow, there is a no going all the way. It jumps up to the donor search form portion. But if we were to follow into the unrelated search coordinator, there's with the understanding that a lot of this is done in SCNFS, would view the message center message center pool and begin the search in SCNFS. So this is obviously once the recipient's HLA results are populated. And I recall there is a chart that we do keep unrelated search documents in.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this is when you could create it. It would be the same as current state. And then this is another question for you, Charlie. Requisitions for unrelated, I assume those are the booking forms needed in this instance also when VGH Immunology is receiving those samples. That
There's also requisitions for ABO and IDMs as well.
There's also, yeah, okay. I keep forgetting to mention all the BB. IDMs and ABO. Thanks. Okay. So once the searches, and we understand the donor search form is quite dynamic and often changed. So we've left it with the suggestion that it'll be on paper. Again, your team can provide me with a copy of that just so that we know what we're looking at. But with the unrelated search coordinator writes the suitable unrelated matches on donor search form as they do in current state, and then the related would write the related matches, if applicable, on donor search form and deliver to related physicians. This is for me. So then the related, I shortened it, didn't I? But related donor physician would write the sibling donors, then deliver to unrelated donor physician, who would then provide their ranking, and then this gets sent to the recipient's physician to select a donor. And then they would send that donor search form back to search coordinators. With the understanding that I think that there might be a little bit of back and forth from the search coordinators and these physicians. They might not pass it on as wonderfully linearly as I've drawn it. Is my understanding correct there?
Yeah, I think it goes back and forth.
Back and forth. So once that's done, thanks for that. Once that's done, and we have the recipient physician selection, search coordinators receive that donor search form, and then we can scan that donor search form into the chart. So I have a question here for maybe the possibility, just as you do now, if there's a possibility to scan things into Cerner, and I think it just comes down to what equipment you have. So I'm putting out a question to our HIM team, our Health Information Management team, just to make sure that we can suggest that, because in that case, once that's done, we can index it into the chart. And the donor search form, which chart do we usually index that into the recipient's chart?
Yes, the recipient's chart.
Haley, it's Marie. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks. Okay. Let's make sure I put that clearly, shall we? Okay. So once that's done, we can notify the Navigator of selection through Message Center. And so I have is selected donor related. And yes, this will go to Nina. I just want to make sure that I'm closing off your positions with the search. Is there anything else after the donor has been selected and we've kind of slotted in that donor search form into the chart? Is there anything else that we need to know for your job here to make this like a full, well-rounded workflow for this search?
So once the donor search form is scanned into the chart, notified Navigator through Message Center, it would close our loop here.
Okay, perfect. So the only thing that I have to mention for Mina, and this was something that, as Joanne had mentioned, we can maybe question a bit, and as I said, we can chat a little bit on our end for encounter strategy, is that if we were going forward with the current proposed encounter strategy, it's the one that's in use at Children's, at this point, we would discharge the referral encounter of donors not selected. And then for Charlie, as you said, nothing to do here at that point. Yeah, so we'll just delete that.
Question, once they've been discharged and we need to, like, say, select a backup donor, would we be able to bring them back in?
You would be able to create, once you've discharged a encounter, you wouldn't kind of reactivate it, you would create another encounter. But the same information can be accessed typically, and documentation-wise, it should be flowing.
Yeah, so if we needed to look at like the whole history of that donor and they had separate encounters, we would know that, like we could look through, is that right?
You can, if you needed to, actually start placing orders again and actively working through like that, doing the workup for that donor, you can create another encounter, but also you can always go in, just as if you had a patient chart always at your fingertips, you can always go in and select that encounter and see everything that was completed.
Okay, because sometimes we'll look at donors like say 5 years or more down the road. So it'll be good if we can see everything that happened with that donor, right? Like all the information, anything in all of their encounters, right, from the search through workup and okay, that's good.
Yeah, we'll just see a list file of all the encounters and it has dates and things attached to them. So
good. Okay, good. So nothing will get lost. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, I'm sorry I was in the system, but I got kicked out with my Visio. I would drag it over, but once we're showing some things in the system, we can definitely show you where those encounters and how easy it is just to select that chart and kind of open up that encounter.
Do you mind if I just say something quickly, Haley? It's Joanne.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just want to call out, for those of you, this might have been discussed with you at a different meeting, but for the unrelated donors, we wouldn't be placing the power plans, essentially. And I think it's because we obviously have that unrelated donor number and they're anonymous. So I think for that point of view, it would be current state to be correctly.
Yeah, we don't have them. We don't have those being placed in the system, I don't think, in here, unless I made an error. But we only have the orders being placed under related donors. So just
correct. Just wanted to call that out.
Thank you, Joanne. That's a good point. I'm like, oh, did I have that? That's great. Any other questions at that point? We're almost at the end of a clean cut of the search request. So once we have gone up, once we've selected, the donor has been selected and we're kind of closing up the search request aspect of this, we have that the Navigator would note the donor selection and record date to initiate transplant request. Right now, I know that there's multiple ways, depending on the person, on how this is tracked. I wonder if the idea will be just to continue tracking them out of system as you do now, if that's the preferred way to move forward, just because it's the comfortable way, or if you would like us to present solutions on how you can track those patients, especially in the sense of needing to start that transplant workup 6 to 8 weeks prior.
Hi, Haley, it's Marie. Are you talking about tracking of selected?
So sorry, I think you cut out there for a second for me. Oh, she got cut off. Poor Marie. We'll come back to her. Anyone else have any questions at that point?
Sorry, it's Val again. I think you guys, maybe you have already figured this out, but so for the recs for the unrelated donor that Charlie is generating for like IDMs, ABO, that will probably be through Accuro then, because they won't have, like, they wouldn't just come from the patient's Cerner file, right?
Accurate or paper, I'd say whatever's correct.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
So usually, so for children's, they've kept those on paper.
Right.
For you, I think that's a matter of, makes no sense. Yeah.
So whatever you do now, Val, I think it'll just be the same.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
Thanks, Val. Marie hasn't been able to join back. Okay, thanks for joining, Dr. Rodrigo. We'll reach out if we need to.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Thanks. Okay, so we'll move on, and when and if Marie's able to join back in, we'll come back to that. I think Norma's asked, we've already covered that. Norma's covered that one for us. So here we are, and with the understanding that there is a clean now divider at least being implemented at the Navigator's office for the search request and then the transplant request process. We've kind of, that's the end of the search request. We're going into the transplant request process. So we start off with, is the donor related? If no, then the Navigator initiates the unrelated donor, I forget what this acronym was, unrelated donor WUR in SCNSS.
Workup request, I think.
Workup request, that makes sense, thank you. And then we have, they'll complete the CTP request form and schedules the courier. That will still have to remain in the courier system. And following that same line, I'm just going to jump down here. At that day of cell receiving, we print the checklist B. I have the stem cell transplant prescription, which in future state, I think the hopes will be that that will be in the system. But then I just had a question as to the prescription verification. I don't think I have a copy of something that's specifically called that.
Hi, it's Catherine. Oh, go ahead. So that stem cell prescription is the workup request. It's part of the workup request that we've already put in. So that's just a copy of that, so that we have that on hand. And the prescription verification comes from the Unrelated Donor Center, and it gives us what they're going to be working on giving us.
Okay, so this comes from does it come from SCNSS or?
Well, we actually do a whole donor sign off too, right? So do we need to put that in there?
Yeah, I think it's actually coming up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just take pieces from the donor sign off and from our initial workup request to put together, so we just have that information on hand when we do the courier handover.
Okay, fair. Sorry, and the buffering for a second. The prescription verification, where do you populate that from or pull it from?
That comes from the donor sign off. So that comes from the Unrelated Donor Center, which comes through SCNSS.
Perfect. Okay. ID memo?
That comes from CBS, so from SCNSS.
Okay, just making sure that if we need these things on paper, that we know that we can pull them.
And the courier itinerary comes from, right now we're using on-time courier, so it comes from them.
Okay, and then the stem cell, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this one. The prescription, all I can think of is my little inpatient transplant nurse brain is the prescription that they write usually on the inpatient unit.
No, this is the cells. These are the cells that we're requesting. So we send our request based on the recipient's weight, and we send that request to through SCNSS, through the Unrelated Donor Collection Center, and then they take that information, and they provide us a verification. So that's a CBS form that we complete.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, so with the understanding that a lot of this will have to stay on paper for the reason it needs to be kind of portable and handed off to those that are receiving the cells. Same with checklist B, we'll keep that on paper.
Yeah, and checklist B is our own document, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're hoping to put that into FormFast. I think that was it for that part. So let me just scroll back over to if the donor is related. We are coming to the workup, but you're right that the final sign off, I might just make a note to make sure that in the workflow it's reflected. Okay. So following in the related donor, we have Navigator contacts donor selection via phone. Right now, this is scheduled out of system. Is there a want or a need to have this scheduled in system if we solutioned it?
What does that mean? Sorry.
It would be a request, I think. The way I think it would shake out is that it would be a request to your assistants to plot appointments on something that we call ambulatory organizer. I'm just going to sign in here.
Probably not, because we don't know when they're going to be available, so we just keep calling until we reach them. So.
Oh, okay. So it's not like you have a specific date and time that you guys call them. Oh, you can see all my glory here.
Sometimes we have their emails, so it's a little easier for us to set it up, but
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll go with no. And I think that's one of the things that each of you have your own way of doing that, of monitoring that too.
Really
anyone else?
Where the donor is.
Yeah, exactly.
Great to just leave it, off the system.
Okay, sounds good. And then we have that they would complete, the navigators would complete the initial donor checklist and COVID screen at this time and would send it to the related donor provider. Do I have the right forms there?
Yes, that's correct.
Perfect. So we'll chat about how we can get this in system and off paper coming up. And then we have related donor physician receives that initial donor discussion checklist. And would this be the appropriate time that they would enter any related donor workup orders that are from that physician package?
Hi, it's Catherine. I think that would work. It would also be nice maybe even before that phone call if we know that there's going to be some, standing consults that we might want to chat with the donor about.
Okay.
Yeah, with that initial phone call, we often go right into sending them requisitions and physical exam forms to their family doctor and everything. It might be nice if the related donor physician has already initiated that when they selected the donor as first choice.
Perfect. I will switch it around. That's easy enough. Okay. What I do have here is that once you've completed that checklist, any standard workup orders could be placed by the navigator per site policy. So requisitions for organ function, blood tests and IDMs, any workup appointment requests.
Okay, that actually might be good to leave with us because then if we're moving quickly onto the second choice donor or something like that, we can do it quickly. So.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think that there's a possibility for a bit of separation there, knowing that the physician might have things that they can order that we would not encourage for navigators to order, like diagnostics. So good, we have that there. I'll try to have the physician order still placed before the phone call though, so then you have everything. And then we have send requisitions to donor. And is this the same time that we send that CTP potential donor assessment questionnaire to them to complete?
Yes.
Perfect. Monitors for results and notifies related donor provider once they're received. I'm going to add that in later. So results, as we said, will come through, depending on where they've been sent, will either come through Results Review or Care Connect or via fax. Okay. Moving on. Any questions so far? Pausing to hear on that one. I do want to hopefully finish up this in hopefully about 10 minutes, and then we can move on to some other things to discuss. Further testing required at this time. If the related donor physician needs further testing, then they can place those required orders, which would then go to the navigator to send those requisitions and monitor for results, and then of course notify the donor provider. Pop down to this choice of whether there's a notice of exceptional distribution required. If yes, we can have the related donor physician initiate that notice of exceptional distribution at this time. We do have, this is also part of a decision required for how we could possibly get this in system. Then we have the understanding that recipient physician would discuss this with the recipient and would sign the notice of exceptional distribution.
Yes, it's actually a consent. So the reason that the physicians often do it over the phone as a verbal consent, or else the recipient and the physician both sign it.
Consent, but signed by in person if patient can.
Well, yes. Although to be honest, I'd say 90% of the time it's over the phone because it's usually right before admission. If we're finding more things to have an exceptional distribution for, so they'll do it in person if they're seeing the patient in clinic, but otherwise they'll call them up and do it over the phone.
Okay. They might, if it's signed by patient, it might have to remain on paper. So that's something for us to discuss. Okay, recipient physician discusses with the recipient and signs. So that they'll have the discussion with the patient and they'll sign that and then send for signature to applicable providers. So the program director and the director of releasing facility, we've noticed that this might be the same individual, but they would still complete the signature twice. And then the related donor physician completes final sign-off form. Is that, I feel like this was, perhaps this is done sooner than.
No, that's good. I think that's good.
Okay. Okay, perfect. I think I just have to rearrange when the printouts are coming, so I'll do that. Okay. Notifies Navigator via message center or other for passing them in the hall. Navigator reviews final sign-off and exceptional distribution if applicable. And will donor be seen in doctor's clinic? Yes. This is when they, if not already placed, they can place a scheduling request for the GPO appointment for the donor. And then we have a call it that this would go to the doctor's clinic. And if not, then we can drop down to, is the donor to be collected in HAU? If no, then likely that would be a marrow harvest. And if yes, we could, if not already placed, we can place a scheduling request for HAU and daycare appointments if applicable. And we already spoke about what is scheduled directly, which this is usually the assistant scheduling these directly.
Okay. The sign-off is actually a little bit past all of those steps. So GPO, we usually have, the donor would have to go see them ahead of the donor sign-off. And also HAU sees them ahead of the donor sign-off because the donor's consent for the procedure is part of the donor sign-off. So just.
Okay, so doctor's clinic, and HAU, and then final sign-off. Okay. So I might actually move that sign-off away from this exceptional distribution section and put it a little later.
Yeah, sure. It's always sort of the last bit that gets done.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so then within HAU, this is, again, we've chatted about how this will be scheduled, and it says in my workflow, send health screen questionnaire. Is this the patient health screen questionnaire we're sending a copy that the patient had completed to apheresis?
Yes.
Okay, that's usually part of the apheresis booking package, right?
Yeah. CCTL gets the scheduling request as well. It's for both HAU and CCTL.
Okay. Okay, and this is to apheresis.
Yeah, Haley, it's Catherine. So we send them the initial health screen questionnaire, and then we receive it and send it along to the apheresis unit. And then the second one is usually done in the apheresis, so they provide that copy of that second one.
It's kind of like you guys complete one once and they complete one once, but you give them a copy of the one that
and the one that we completed. And the one that we receive, exactly, we send it over. Yep.
Okay.
I may sign it. Yep.
Copy. Let's say patient completed copy. Okay. And they sign. Okay. Apheresis CTP collection is being worked on separately, and then from there, the navigator can review the LB6 appointment statuses within the appointments tab and/or ambulatory organizer. We can show that in the system. And then there is discussion to be had about the notification letter with the understanding that the data coordinators populate it currently, but that this is usually where the navigators would print that notification letter and provide to the recipient physician, where the recipient physician.
We provide it with a full package, the full.
Yeah, I think the reason I haven't mentioned, and I have it mentioned a little later on, is that the package is kind of now incorporated within the system, depending what we decide.
Okay.
So a lot of the package is orders, and then there's forms, and the forms aspect we're hopefully aiming to cover in system. So review and signs notification letter. This is the physician filling out order to thaw cryopreserved products. Is this about the right timing for that step as part of the package usually?
Right before admission, yeah, which looks like that's where you have it. So it's good.
Perfect.
And that's usually the last thing that we have, because when cells arrive, then the patient's usually admitted the next day. So that's usually the last thing that we're waiting for.
Last thing before cells arrive. Okay. And provide
the last thing before the patient's admitted, because the cells arrive and the patient's admitted the next day. They need to cryopreserve the product at that time.
Well, that makes sense. This is the order to thaw the product, though. The order to freeze the product.
Yeah.
Okay,
so the cells arrive, and then they cryopreserve them, and then from that a document is populated that ticks for them to thaw them.
It's not. I don't know if it's to thaw or just to choose which products will be thawed, because on the auto side sometimes they save some of the products. So that's the purpose of that form, is to say that these products have been cryopreserved, and we know that that's been completed. Everything was successful, and then the doctors tick off which ones they want infused, and we use that as part of the admission package. And then I think on the ward there's a different order to thaw.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I've never seen this one before. Okay, this is for a physician to select which to thaw.
Yes. And it's also a kind of verification that these products have been cryopreserved, and there's no problem.
I'll just put cryo. Okay, thank you. All right, so at this time we can provide that notification letter for scanning, and also the order to thaw, and then that's done. That can be done in clinic. Again, as we said, we're going to see that that's an option to have that done directly in the office. And then complete CTP initial assessment power form. This is a power form that's already been created with the children's providers in mind, but has a lot of the fields that will be applicable, especially for your FACT accreditation through CBIN. I'm going to say that wrong. Oh, I'm going to say it wrong. Your FACT accreditation. And then it replaces, or should replace, the recipient and donor testing summary of initial patient and BMT donor testing, and then even possibly those classification forms, the disease classification forms. So this is being dealt with in, or kind of separated into provider design. But just as I mentioned too, those, that's where a lot of the information, that information is going into the system, and then throughout the way where you've seen those decisions required are where other forms are hopefully going to be system-based.
Wow.
Yeah, hopefully. A little less paperwork.
Yeah.
Reviews all results of documentation system and completes admission checklist, which we'll keep on paper, but there is an option to have it scanned into patient chart. I think right now it's considered part of the patient chart, not just a guideline.
This is the assistance, right?
Do the assistants usually complete the checklist?
Yes.
Okay, that is good to know, because I was in the wrong lane.
By that, do you mean whether they're faxing the documents to various departments?
Yeah, there's a note to how, like, this is the notification letter has been sent here, and,
right.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, anything else to say about the workflow that we have going? Have we missed any aspects of the process? Oh, you know what? I do have questions. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so we looked at the related donor sign-off package, but the unrelated donor sign-off package, I think, sounds like it'll still be paper, but it's a similar thing, right, where we have to look at exceptional distributions, and the doctor has to look at everything and sign everything off. Anyways.
Yeah, I think we're hoping that all sign-offs will have the same format, so I'm sure.
It might be hard just because the forms are so different, but like we don't have a prescription verification for related donors, right? But
yeah, there's ways to do it in the system where, depending on what you select, other, like they call it conditional, where other fields open. So, if you select that it's kind of like contained within one box, but that there's different tabs, and you complete only the fields that make sense for that transplant. But I think we'll show you what we mean. Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. And the other thing, I know it's on the radar, but it's just once again that everything that's being done for the donor in terms of workup is going to be billed to the recipient's MSP.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We did take note of that. Thank you so much for pointing that out again. Thank you. And then for that, I know that we chatted on Thursday about how the assistants cover a lot of the recipient workup orders. and kind of the scheduling of the appointments, or requesting at least. When does the recipient provider place those workup orders when it comes to this new section of transplant request process? So we've already worked them up in the sense of HLA and IDMs and ABO, and we've selected the donor. When does the recipient provider typically?
So there's a whole, you're right, there's like a whole recipient workup, and at the very beginning of that, the recipients task the attending the workup orders. Maybe back out.
The assistant task attending?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a package, and so then the attendings just check off which tests they want, and then part of the package is the orders, like bone marrow biopsy, lumbar puncture orders, everything in there. So.
Is that usually around 6 to 8 weeks prior to?
Yeah, it's as soon as, at the same time as we're requesting the donor, the assistants are starting to work on the patient workup pre-transplant. And so the first step that they do is send that package to the physician.
Perfect. And then the physician would pass that back to them?
Yes.
I think this could be an interesting part because we time all these tests then based on where they're at in their chemo cycle and integrate the blood work into their daycare appointments and stuff. So it'll be interesting if some of this stuff is just automatically shot off to like PFTs and stuff. It'll be interesting to see how that works.
Yes, that's a good point. So usually when these orders, so once the provider places the orders, depending on where they're going, if they're external and they have requisitions that need to be managed, that can be kind of controlled from a time aspect with the assistant in mind. But we'll keep that in mind. So we'll say time sensitive and dependent on the patient. Okay. How are allied health consults organized when to be completed? And is this for just for recipient or both recipient and donors?
Usually just recipient, but it's all through, again, the assistants. It's part of the workup. So the doctor in that checklist will check off like all of those consults, and the recipients will book them. Oh, sorry, the assistants. Sorry.
Yeah,
and they're booked
only
through
ones.
Accuro.
and they're booked through Accuro?
Yep.
Dietitian, social work, pharmacy?
Yep.
Okay.
And then dentistry is done through the BC Cancer Dentistry.
Okay. I think that's on the order, so that's good. I think we've covered that. So I'll say no. When are conditioning orders placed? I know from an inpatient side, the provider will usually complete those once the patient is on the inpatient unit.
Yeah, we need to know for the notification letter and for the admission date. So we try, as soon as, sometimes the doctor has to wait for the workup results to decide whether it's reduced intensity or not. But anyways, so before the day of admission.
Chemo, do you mean the actual chemo orders, like when they are admitted to?
Well, they won't actually, they're not writing the orders, but we have to know the protocol because the notification letter is going to be stating it. And also we need to admit the patient on the correct day for them to have their transplant on the corresponding day.
But Haley, are you asking like when they actually order the chemo or when we find out what kind of chemo they're going to get, what conditioning they're going to get?
Now that I know what kind of protocol we'll get and how that's decided, but conditioning orders for outpatients is a question for me too. So for like the Maltolin autos.
Yeah, I think the patient has an actual appointment in daycare for the physician to write the orders. I'm not sure what day it is, if it's like day -3 or something. I don't know if we can find out though.
Okay, that's just more for curiosity's sake. I don't think.
And then on the inpatient unit, they do that once they're admitted.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Does anyone else from my team have any questions about workflow? Joanne, I see your mention for do we need to consider if the donor is a minor and being worked up at the
That doesn't happen very often. I think I only run into it a couple times, but I don't know if we need to put a box in the workflow of the minor. They has to be referred to the hospital.
Let me just put a call out for future Haley without messing everything up here.
Yeah, this is actually an issue for us because I mean, we do a lot of, we have a lot of children, like BC Children's donors here, and they also do, occasional collections for us. So, but at least if they're on Cerner and we're on Cerner, maybe this will be something that gets easier.
Yeah, for sure. But it's a good point. We need to consider it from the different facility perspective. So it's good to have a call out on that one. Thanks, Chipo. Okay. So now that we've seen the kind of proposed workflow with a few changes to be made, but hopefully, I know that we haven't seen it in system, but hopefully some confidence that we do think that we can get a lot of this done in system. I think what I'll do is jump back to the PowerPoint. Okay. And I think I'll let my colleague Olga take over for this discussion. Olga, are you okay to present this?
Yeah, thank you.
Olga's from our ambulatory team.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Olga from ambulatory team, and let me just a moment share my screen. Or maybe no, I don't need to share my screen. So we have more detailed discussion about message center on the previous session. However, at this session we have a bunch of new people who might not been on the previous session and do not see it. So I will quickly repeat some main points regarding a message center tool, and later in follow-up email I can again send this link to the previous session and its recording, so every one of you can watch our demo and like in more details to understand what this is tool about. So, Message Center is a tool for the inner communication among personnel, and actually, I can try to. If you want, I can show you some of those things later, but if you ask me, so. On the Message Center tool, you have personal folder where you can see your own direct messages to you. Also, you will see proxy folder or proxy tab where you can see direct messages from other people that give you some temporary access to their personal messages for any reason. For example, they go to the vacation. And there is other third tab is Message Center pool, where group messages can be shown like without a direct recipient. So here you can see, here you will see direct, here you will see messages to the group. As Haley mentioned previously, it can be any request to, for example, create an encounter for the patient that's sent to the group of the assistant, or it can be sending of TWRF form for the navigators and search coordinators. And to there I want to focus for now is to understand which exact message center pool you want in your workflow. So there are for now, like to start our discussion, there exist three standard options for message pool. Is admin pool, which is considering for communication with clerks, clinical pool, which some sort of group for the nurses and the clinical personnel, and another standard option is provider pool. Of course, you might not need all of those pools, or maybe you need some additional pools for some additional conversation and to involve another people that has some responsibilities in your workflow. So could you please share some your thoughts about what message center pool might be helpful for you for this communication among your team during the workup, or maybe among other teams?
can I just ask quickly, it's Val again, is this something that we'll be able to see, like even if we're not part of that pool? Like it'll always be a part of the chart, like a chart, sort of like charting or something, like a...
Yeah, give me a moment. I will present my screen so you can see. So that's what I told. This is your private messages. This is something proxy, and here's pool, and you can, here's list of the pool that you already opt, but you always can go and opt to any available pool, like BCH.
Like, can we see historically the pools, like the communication within those pools? It'll be open to everybody, or just to the people who got the message?
In pool, it open for everybody, I believe.
Okay.
So when the message is received to the pool, unless it's actually been cleared by someone, it will just sit there. So when you opt into the pool, you'll be able to see it. So depending on what workflow your team decides on, and there's a way to kind of put a status in, saying like it's seen or acknowledged. I can't remember the exact terminology, but we can leave messages in the pool. But also there is a way that when a message is sent, that that document can be saved to the chart.
Okay. I was thinking it was going to become a part of the chart, but you have to actually save it to the chart.
You select an option within the message saying save to chart.
Okay.
It's pretty easy. Olga hopefully will show. Maybe I don't know if anyone else just got kind of kicked out for a moment and back.
Yeah, but you have to opt into the pools, right, to see it.
Yes, you have to opt into the pool.
Yeah. And here you see like you can display messages from the last.
So it's not exactly like nurses' notes or something, or interdisciplinary notes. Okay.
No, it just emails. It's like communication among people.
Okay. And when you say provider, go ahead.
No, you go Val.
I was just going to say with the provider pool, you would actually have to select, like it wouldn't just automatically have all the physicians that were involved in that patient's care, right?
So the pools can be set up, and once you opt in, you're going to stay in that until it's saved until you opt out. So,
but it's not typically based off of patient, just to Val's point there. Like it's not a pool per patient. I think one of the main key things to kind of just put it, like one of the differences, it's not like email in the sense that any messaging you do is tied to a patient's chart. So it's not an email where you're just sending it to other staff members. It's related to a patient in context to that patient.
Okay, and when you opt into a pool, would it be just for that patient, or would it be just that pool would be for every time someone sent something from any patient to the admin pool, it would go to everybody? That would be like that, or?
Correct, the latter that you mentioned. Yeah.
Huh. Obviously, I think a search pool would be good, but it's hard to think of how the other ones, because I think the problem with making pools for anything else is that there's different people involved for every patient, but the search team is sort of standard, but I don't know. I guess if all the assistants want to get messages about all the patients, it might be too much.
So there's a few ways that it can be divided. It could be, say, a Navigator pool, but only for the navigators that typically deal with certain providers.
We
there's
don't
a way
do
to
that.
separate it out a bit more.
Okay, so we all take, all of the navigators take any of the patients, from any of the physicians, and we're just cross-training now so that everybody, we will also be all taking different types of files. But I mean, obviously our group emails are different because we're not usually talking about patients per se, so that's different. But sometimes we need to see if there's an assistant available to do something. We might try to let all of the assistants know, but it's usually not something that's patient specific, so they have an actual assistant. So,
a lot of
my only thought is the search pool.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can start with that. If a search pool is.
I don't know what everybody else thinks. Yeah.
And this might come, once we start clicking more in system, I know it might make sense for what kind of pools. It also, oh my gosh, I'm buffering here for a second. Please hold. So also we can have a lot of the functionality that we're about to propose for certain documents might help. Like maybe we'll cover the forms first and come back to the pools, in that how we are hoping for things to shape up in regards to the forms and how they can be built within system or reflected within system. So it might help to go over that. But from a high level, if you're saying like an allo search pool.
Yeah, well, I just think that like every patient that we will, if we can just have like patient-specific pools, then we would put in their attending and maybe the attending on the ward, or somebody in daycare. Like we could make up our own pool per patient. I don't know if that's how it's done, but if we had a pool that was for like usable for every patient, it would be the search pool, because we could message the people on the search team, if they don't mind, about something to do with a search, and that would be handy to have a pool that we could just select. But
I think that sounds like a good start.
Yeah, and I guess we could
would it make sense to have an auto search pool and an allo search pool?
Well, I think because we're cross-training, and so different, like right now there's an auto team and an allo team, but I don't know. And I guess so. The only thing, again, is because it's patient-specific, every patient has their own like auto navigator or allo navigator. So to message everybody about a certain patient, I don't see how often we would use that.
Okay. So it sounds like pools might not be...
Like I actually think they might be misused, because it might be tempting for other people, throughout the program to just message all the navigators about a certain patient, right? When they need to be actually finding the navigator who's involved in that patient's care.
Okay.
I mean, I guess like you're saying, once someone's seen the message, it's gone. So maybe it's not a big problem.
I would say that if there doesn't seem to be a need for pools, it's okay to move forward without them, because it can still be used between, from navigator to provider to assistant.
Yeah. What does everybody else think? Don't know if anyone has any thoughts.
I think a search team pool is probably a good idea. And then if there's any additional pools that's needed. So I don't know much about these pools, Hayley, but do they have to be created by someone at CSPs? Or if, for instance, it comes out that we need to have a new pool created, the team could just set one up themselves?
I think they have to the reason we asked is that we have to create it at CSP.
Okay, that's what I figured, yeah.
Yeah, but not to say, I mean, I'll let the ambulatory people speak to, if we must decide this today, or if we can wait till our next session so there's a better understanding. I have a +1 from Charlie for a search team pool.
Yeah,
good.
For sure.
Search team makes sense. Is it quite a lot of work building these pools out from a CSP perspective?
I'm going to leave it to Olga or Jack.
Yeah, for sure we can wait for, give time to discuss it among your team and then return with some ideas. Yeah, so maybe, I don't know, maybe you need someone, the same pool to communicate to some assistants. I don't know. So yeah,
if we don't need to, I guess the question is, doesn't need to be decided today. Can I ask Jack and Olga, is there a need from CORE for assistance on this?
No.
Sorry for the technical question on that, guys.
No, this is Jack from Ambulatory. This bill does not involve CORE, and it's a fairly, it's not a time-consuming build. So if we did decide that we needed to add some, it's not a huge effort to do so.
Okay.
I mean, if we change a little bit how how we do things. We might use like an assistant pool at the very beginning to ask if anybody is able to take this file or something like that, right? We might do the same with navigators. So in some ways, there might be, occasional times we would use a pool.
Yeah, I think that's my thought too. I think it might be good to have a search pool, a navigator pool, and an assistant pool.
Right.
And that way other people can opt into those pools as well if needed, right? So.
Right. I guess we could also, although usually because this is going to be attached to a patient, usually we would just go to the donor physician that was on that month, but maybe we would have like a donor physician pool and unrelated donor physician pool and related donor physician pool.
That's definitely possible, and they can always, for the month that there's a related donor physician, they can opt into the pool and they can opt out.
Yeah, I think that's
so
really
then,
good. Yeah.
Okay, so then that would be helpful. Okay.
That's a really good idea. That's perfect. Between Joanne's suggestions, so for search pool, assistant pool, which I think is good, especially when we need encounter creations. So the assistant pool is good for when you need to request maybe an encounter if you want to create it. And then a navigator pool, and then we'll have a related donor physician pool, and then I assume an unrelated donor physician pool, but then the recipient physician will be specific, yeah?
The other thing, I guess, to think about is we're talking about doing what we're calling pods, where we're going to have teams of navigators and assistants that will be responsible for individual files. So maybe eventually we would put in like the pods as a pool if people are trying to communicate, with somebody that's looking after that file. I don't know. So they haven't really told us exactly how that's going to look. So.
I feel that if you need to create for any patient some sort of pods of the people like care team who deal with this patient, we should build new pool for every patient. So I would not see how it's possible per patient, I mean.
Oh, no, I can see what you mean, but per pod, I can see I can see how that could be beneficial without knowing how it's going to show in future. Never to say that things can't be changed, just can't be changed in a day in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm stopping presenting and giving back to Haley. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. And our favorite topic for forms and documentation. Respectful of people's time, and maybe they want to get up and move for 2 minutes. Is everyone okay if I continue and just let us know if you step away for a moment and come back? I'm not hearing too much argument, so I'm going to keep going, but please feel free to message in the chat if you need to step away and come back for a break. We know that 3 hours is a long time. Okay, so we have this first slide, Forms in FormFast or Keep as Paper. FormFast, we described in our previous presentation, which I know was a while ago. It's a link or an application within PowerChart where you can go in and select paper copies to be printed kind of from the patient's chart. And usually what happens is it places a barcode on that paper copy so that once you have completed that documentation, so for example, a lot of consents, as we need patients' option to sign consents, they are printed from FormFast, and the patient and provider will sign the consent, and it's placed within the chartlet to be scanned in at a later date by health records, or HIM is something that you might hear more of with CST coming in. So things that will stay on paper, and actually the first item here, it will be on paper. It actually will be should be part of FormFast is the CTP infusion record, and then the stuff that stays on paper are things like guidelines for patients. They're not necessarily going into FormFast. Those are things that can change and are more directed to, as we said, the directives for patients and not necessarily really directly to their treatment in a sense. So those kinds of things will stay on paper and will have to be supplied kind of out of system. The cryopreserved CTP request for thawing, courier call information, and checklist B. I think our hope is to have those kind of things in FormFast. And then the last three, the facts cover sheet, apheresis booking checklist, and the booking checklist for daycare, and then also the admission checklist we'll have on paper. Because we typically don't put checklists into Cerner. It's kind of a guide for your practice to make sure that everything's completed. So we do usually maintain those outside of the system. As I mentioned for FormFast, all of the consents, with the exception that we'll talk about the exceptional distribution, with the understanding that that can be completed by phone often 90% of the time. And then we have the donor consent form for histocompatibility, hepatitis, syphilis, and HIV testing. That'll be in FormFast. And then it's possible to put the questionnaires into FormFast. Well, I think we're going to discuss those, the option for some of those questionnaires. Outside of the system, the ones that would go into FormFast would likely be the ones that the patient is completing on their own. As we know, patients can't sign in the system, so we have to have them sign it on that questionnaire. And then scan back into the chart. And then the request for CTP collection and processing will stay in FormFast and to be scanned in later, with the understanding that it needs to be shared with the CCTL lab, who are only in view-only access in Cerner.
Just to say that the admission checklist isn't really a checklist. It's actually the physician's sign-off of the patient. Like the physician, isn't that right? Or no, maybe I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of the facts cover sheet. Sorry. So you're right. That one's okay. That's a checklist.
Okay. Yeah.
The facts cover sheet is actually the sign-off.
Oh, okay. We do have sign-offs, and you'll have a chance to tell us if we've got all.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just thinking that that's what that was, but it's not. So yeah.
No worries. Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of forms. Okay. So moving on to TWRF design options, we have, we understand, with the understanding that this is a couple more pages, and then also has the guidelines. As we mentioned, the guidelines will be separated, and this directive from physicians, these aspects will be covered within design if we move forward with building it out. So the option one, as we mentioned, I think we've already got our answer for this from the workflow discussion that we had regarding HLA and IDM orders. This is, we understand, the directive from physicians to initiate that transplant workup. And a lot of these are within this form, or at least within the directive, is their orders. So HLA typing of the patient with confirmatory typing, HLA typing of CIV donor, maybe not less specific, but just to kind of cover our bases, is that this could be just orders within the system. The pros, and when we say orders, the power plans are like PPOs in the system. So pros of that is that all information is viewable on one page. Cons is that provider will have to place the power plan, and then the process of placing this power plan should be clarified. Oops, sorry, let me go back. Now, another option that we wanted to run by you is the option for a power form to be filled out by the provider. So a power form, this one I do want to sign in and show what we mean by a power form. Pardon me for getting signed out here. But some pros to this is that a power form is close to the current process where a form is being completed. And it is, power forms are available across encounters. So even though we document in one encounter, say in doctor's clinic, it'll be viewable within an encounter, say in the navigator's office. And then all information is viewable on one page. And the cons is that while filling, the user won't be able to navigate kind of outside of the form within the system. So I will show you what I mean. Just signing in. I'm going to sign in as a provider to show a power form just because it reflects BMT content. That's what we already have built within the system. So I'm signing as a provider. I'm just going to search for a patient, my patient. And just to speak to that question of selecting encounters is that even when an encounter is discharged, any encounter created under a patient, you'll be able to see. So any instance of a patient visit within the system, you can select it when you go to open the patient's chart. So I'm going to select for their referral encounter, and I'm going to sign as a consulting provider in this instance. And this is what the patient's chart looks like. So just to give an example of what a power form looks like, try not to focus too much on the what's inside the power form, because this is for, we believe, for providers, but this is a power form, and I've opened it up. There's various places where you can open up a power form from. Let me close this out. Actually, I'll show you what I mean. Your physicians, nursing especially, will have these M pages, as we call them, and there's components. And what I did was I went to the forms components on this provider's M page, and I selected the plus and selected for this power form to open. There's a few other places we can open it, but we won't. This will be hopefully a way that we'll have you guys access forms. Again, don't look too much at the content because we are looking just for the functionality of a power form right now. But as you can see, I got a power form open. I can complete things within it, and I can go to different tabs. But what I can't do is click outside and go perusing in my patient's chart. I'm trying to click to go, like, I want to see maybe labs. So that's the problem with the power form, is once you're in it, it's not possible even to go looking throughout the chart. Even if I went and put it on another screen, it's just not possible. So that's what power form looks like. So our thought is to create this TWRF for option 2, like a power form, but with the understanding that the provider won't be able to navigate outside of it. And even when viewing it, you can't navigate outside of it throughout the patient's chart.
Can you open more than one? Like if they change their mind about something, can they go and open a second one? Or
yes, yeah. You can have multiple forms signed on the patient. So go in and sign that form.
And they would just send us a message saying that they had completed this, or could they like task it to us, or like Acuro, or how does it?
I think the Irvi, what were we saying for the messaging or the downstream from the power form?
They can message them. It's just there is the whole signature and stuff that we were trying to accomplish from it. They can forward it to them saying that it's completed.
Yeah, we can. There's no way to put a rule in there for that to fire to a message pool or anything like that, right?
There is. Depending on the DTA and stuff like that, we can, and there's tasks and stuff, so we can look at those options and present them back.
Okay, so worst case part of the workflow would be the provider would complete the power form and then message the pool, the search pool. But we can look into whether there's a way that it can automatically fire.
I think so right now they message the Navigator, and then the Navigator takes note of it and messages, like sends it to the search pool.
Okay, so that would be the same in current state. They could sign it and then message so once they sign it, they can go to the message center and message.
Okay. And then the other thing too about this form is like currently we also have, like, if down the road a different Navigator takes the file to transplant, they would go back and look at that form and see what the doctor said. So okay.
Yeah, so it would be part of the patient's chart from there. So I've opened up a new power form, and with this field specifically within this form, you can see how you can pull information forward. We probably wouldn't have that, but you can sign a separate one, and it would show up as 2 instances within the patient's chart.
Okay, and the reason that I mean, this looks better. It looks like more like what we're currently doing, and then the power plan would just have a different look, basically, right? Like it wouldn't be a form.
Power plan would be actually placing the HLA orders and IDM orders.
Okay, so they might have to do both, right?
For a recipient, they will already be completing the HLA and IDM orders, but the directives sorry, I'm going to put this in wrong. So the recipient, they would put in a recipient workup power plan already, and they would put that and give it to them, or give it to the inpatient unit. It's that they would have to somehow place directive for donor workup as power plan. So that would be them basically placing orders, which I think you guys have already told us, so that would be fairly like a big.
Well, the only thing about like having a power plan on the unit is that the search team needs to know that those HLA orders, like we do need something that says that this patient does require HLA typing and that the samples didn't just arrive by accident. So.
Right. I think there's a few ways to have that system, whether it's through like requisitions would populate within requisition manager. Anyone else from my team have anything to add to that one?
I guess for me, Haley, John from Order Stats, I'm a little bit confused. So essentially, what we're talking about here, are you talking about creating power forms that also has all the workup and things in it? Or are we just talking about creating a power form for this particular form only?
It's kind of like, so professional practice had given us that there needs to be some kind of direction and system.
Okay, so for that it goes to order blood work.
So it's kind of like whether maybe it's an order placed within a power plan for recipient workup. I'm not sure, but our, the easiest and like the most direct kind of iteration of that into the system from like current state to future is the power form.
Okay.
We think.
Yeah, so from that respect, I think a power form absolutely makes sense. And I guess it'd have to be somewhere in there saying, giving the navigator authorization to put in those orders, right?
Yeah, I think that it was okay because it says initiate. But you're right. Like as long as it's placed that's what the physician wants in system, they can act upon it.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
So what we also don't want to happen is for patients to kind of fall through the cracks because somebody's ordered HLA typing, but we're not aware that that patient is having HLA typing done. So if it's too smooth and they're in the inpatient unit, the doctor is able to order the HLA typing right from the inpatient unit, it might miss our search team. So that's why we've always had this like TWRF or this sort of step where the samples actually arrive in immunology without a requisition, so that somebody has to kind of notify the navigator office that this person has samples, and then we double check with the physician to make sure that this HLA typing is needed, and then they let us know there's a search needed as well. Or it's you just have to make sure that we know whose HLA typing is being done because the doctor might come back a month later and say, "How's the search going?" We have to make if they haven't filled out the power form, we might not know about it. So. It's like having the samples arrive kind of without a rec is one of our kind of double checks that we're aware of this patient needing HLA typing in a search, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, and we can take that away from a lab collection perspective, I think. If we needed to, I think like in a happy path, perfect world, if we did need to have this directive from a provider into system, it seems like option 2 might be the one that seems to be the best selection for your team.
Unless there's some way to say, when they order HLA typing, that it does send a message to the search team, something like that. Maybe they can do them, like maybe there's a new way of doing this where the search team or the navigator team gets notified of every HLA typing request.
I think if there's that automatic notification that we're just talking about there from the power form, that might be quite good if that's possible.
Okay.
And I don't really think they'd be able to put this into a power plan anyways, Haley. So there's too much of it, right? So I think power form's the only option.
Okay, and Joanne, if we aren't able to have, sorry guys, just kind of chat off the side here, but if we aren't able to have this as like a task from the power form, it's possible to put a note type maybe within the recipient workup power plan, saying to.
Yeah, it's it'd be a bit messy, but we could do that if we need to, yeah.
Okay, perfect world. We'll try to see what we can do from this form. So it sounds like from a navigator perspective, we can move forward with trying to formulate the power form for the TWRF.
Yeah, I think so. How does Charlie feel? He would be able to look at this and know how it's going to work.
Yeah, I personally think power form is a little bit better, but it depends on the provider being able to easily access this.
Yeah, they'll be able to easily access it, and a lot of education will be provided to many users, including providers. We would likely put it somewhere easy for them to see within their power chart. I know this probably looks foreign to you at the moment, but and as it goes for teaching, we always teach proper workflow, and then also we're on site to make sure to help with these, to make sure it goes smoothly for the first month or so. Okay.
You're just trying to figure out the actual logistics of communication between once this has been pushed out versus them communicating that with us.
So sorry, right now it is the providers that complete the TWRF, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So then how do we get notified down the stream?
Yeah, I think we'll make sure that we look into how we can get a notification or whether it'll have to be a manual process. So that's a takeaway for us for sure. Okay. Just for the sake of time, if you're comfortable from your team's perspective, we'll move forward with option 2 on this one and move on to the next one. So what we have is the preliminary donor assessment, and then we also have the initial donor discussion checklist. And we know they're not done at the same time, but we've bulked them in as their options would be very similar. Same with the CTP potential donor COVID questionnaire. So the discussion for this one is that we have, so sorry, buffering here. Donor discussion checklist and questionnaire. We have those two that we have that we're thinking on. Questions around this is there any documentation or data from here that's pulled for accreditation purposes, or is this just basically to make sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's?
It's just part of the regulations that we're following. So I think when we do our audits, we'll look at this, but there's no particular information I think that we're pulling.
Okay, that's good to know. Just to speak, because to speak to the options that we have, neither of them are able to be kind of pulled. There's not data that once you enter into the system can be pulled for reporting. So for option 1, navigators and assistants to complete a note with auto text and then with a sign option. The pros for that are that gathered data can automatically be processed. Any custom notes can be easily added. User will be able to navigate in the system to see other information in Power Chart. So that's the opposite of the Power Form. And then cons is that it cannot be a multi-contributor, so we can't have multiple people contributing to the same document. And then data coordinators will need to input data. And then option 2 being FormFast, which was that application that I mentioned before, which is basically a paper process, but in which you can print from the patient's chart. Let me just click into it. And it'll pull up a document that'll have a barcode on it, so it's easy for scanning back in later. Not usually this. Hello. Sorry guys, my connection's slow today. Maybe it doesn't have us watching it. There we go. So that's FormFast, and you can find what you're looking for. You can favorite things within your own chart, and let's pick a consent form. Just picking a random form. Yes, so you populate it, print it, and this code allows for scanning back in later. So just as an example of FormFast. Okay, Irby, did you want to show option 1 within system?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm logged in as the assistant. So the question we do have is it the navigator or the assistant that will be completing that form, the one she had pulled up for the consent and the preliminary health? Can you guys answer that for us, or?
It's the search team, so it's Nina, right? She's the related search coordinator, and Bessie.
Okay, so are they nurse navigators or assistants?
Assistants.
They're coordinators.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So I'm logged in as. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, Catherine. The second form is one that the navigator completes.
Well, actually, yeah, you're right.
Well,
right now we're looking at. Okay, go ahead.
No,
okay,
that's okay. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I think yeah, we're just doing both the same way. So, okay.
Well,
right. I think you're right. The first one that I showed was for the coordinator, and the second one was for Navigator. So it would be both.
So there will just be a slight difference from a system perspective, but the concept will be the same. As a coordinator, they will not have the documentation. They will go to the notes section. So I'm logged into PowerChart as a assistant at this point, and they will then click on the note here. We will have to determine which note type they will exactly be using. So we will narrow those down. But for right now, for demo purposes, I'm just going to use the nursing narrative note, and then I will go ahead and say and we have something called auto text within the system, so we can build them out, and what we've done is we've taken the form and looked at it and completed the auto text, so it will then pull up all the information that is on the form within the system, and they will have, and there's different ways we can design it. If you need yes and no or completed, we can add things like that. But here you can see we're pulling the date. So here some of the things will be a type in, so they can say sibling called in, whatever they're putting, and then demographics obtained on, so the date that it was obtained on. So we'll just say, and then for patient, so I've taken, I've mocked it up from the form itself and a relationship to the patient. So if it's a brother or a sister, you can put that here, and then the name of the patient that we're working with, and it's the same one that Haley was working on. Their date of birth, and then their PHA number, and if the translator is required, we can put a yes and no drop down, and I'll show you those options. The languages, and then here we've exactly taken what was on the paper, and it's, I guess they use a check mark or an X next to it, so they can do the same thing here. And then at the end, are you willing to have the HLA typing an infection, so they can say complete that, and then it matched yes and no. So this is a drop down option, and then they can say yes, so that way it will populate with the yes. And then same thing with the medical history, and did they have any significant illnesses? We can say yes. We'll say yes for the cancer type. I will just say ABC, and then treated, so we will say they were treated with surgery. So all of these options, so we have a few ways of configuring it, so we can go over that afterwards once the decision is made. And then as a coordinator, they will go ahead and sign it. And at that point, you can see that now it has become part of the documentation here.
So this is an actual, like, this is a very important consent for us, I guess, because it's part of our FACT accreditation, that the donor is consenting to be tested for HLA. Does that mean it should be form fast because all the consents have to be forms, or?
But does the question will be, does the patient need to sign this form, or is it done only by the health clinicians?
It's a verbal consent over the phone, so they would never sign it.
I think of farmers not signing a consent form, right? Yeah, so yeah. I think as long as it's still documenting that they've given their verbal consent to the HLA type thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so when Haley described, just to clarify, like the ones that we put in form fast is because we're obtaining a wet signature at that point from patient.
Okay.
But this is, and just, so this is also, to add to that, every time you see that author contributor, that is someone signing it. It's kind of like an electronic signature.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it possible, so this form then is signed whether or not to proceed with testing by the related donor physician? Is it possible for them to then do an electronic signature on this form?
I think Irvi's about to show you that.
Yes, the next piece, yes. So after the...
Sorry.
No, that's okay. After the coordinator has completed it, they will then forward it. So then we will make sure that they sign the form, and then they will click here. And of course, in the real world, you will have provider names and nurses' name. So from the paper version, it looked like the navigator and the provider needed to sign it, so they can select the clinicians that need to sign it. They will then click OK. And again, they will click OK here. So at this point, you will see right here is where I want you guys to see is the signature line. That right now it's showing the scheduling clerk oncology. That was the closest position we were able to use. But I'm now going to go into the system as a nurse. Oh, sorry, as a provider. And I'm going to refresh here. So here you will see that when I log in as a provider, now I have like how Olga and them were talking about message center. So here is an example. By forwarding this to the provider, I have now been able, now I can see it under the provider's message center. And here is the consent. And I need it forwarded for signed document. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on it. It will then open up the same document that was completed by the coordinator, and you will see that I have an action panel at the bottom, and it is showing the sign selected because that's what I had asked them to do. So I will go ahead and complete the signature at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK and close, that it looks good, and I'm OK for you to proceed with it. So I'm going to jump back to the original one to show you guys what it will look like. So here now you will see that I have a signature line for the provider. See right here, it says that the provider has electronically signed it. And if the nurse needs to be, the nurse navigator needs to sign it, we can do the same steps for him or her, and that signature line will appear here. So that way you have covered all the signatures that you need within the system because it doesn't need a vet signature. Questions so far?
I just have a question. I think that looks great in terms of the physician signature. I saw that there's a text field, so it's not whether or not they're going to sign or refuse to sign, but it's whether or not they want to, like they'll sign regardless, but whether or not to proceed with testing or not. So is there a way to sort of build that in?
So the only downfall about this is once they have signed it, they have to amend it. So I'm going to go ahead and let me hold on one second. I'm logged in as a nurse at this point, and I'm going to go ahead and amend that note so that way I can show you guys. So here is the note, and I can then say, you can't modify the note itself, but here you can say approving, and I know I'm logged in as a nurse, but I already signed it off over there, so I'm just trying to show you this part. Approving as approving for testing. And then I'm going to go ahead and sign it. And then this is how the document will look at that point. So it's just a little flipped around. I should have asked that question earlier, but right here, it will show you that they are approving for the HLA testing. Just ignore the ambulatory nurse part, but that's a provider thing. And it will be here and with their signature line.
I think so. They would. Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
So they'll go in and sign it and then have to go in and do an addendum separately to then say that they're approving to proceed with HLA testing?
So unfortunately, when you're at the message center, I am not able, I can go ahead and modify it here. So so if we were to do the whole, they can do it here and they can then sign it here. But since we've signed it, it's going to be double signature.
On the form itself, there's a checkbox, right, where they say proceed with HLA testing. Isn't there?
Yes, there is. On one of them, there's a proceed or do not proceed. Well,
Yeah,
I don't think.
Can we put that in there? Or like we put that in when the physician signs it, they just check that off or somehow say yes or no or something? Or
if we go with the note type, the only way we can add anything is via an addendum, not as within the note. That is one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can multiple people? So this one is only just one person can do the note, and then somebody else can sign it or add an addendum, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I think this would just be an education piece when you're doing a doctor training that, you know, when they get this message center note type from the navigator, they're just going to have to do the little addendum to say yes, they're agreeing essentially with HLA typing, and then sign it.
Okay. And then the other option would be form fast. Okay.
Are they able to, like similar to what you had above on that form where there was the drop down that said yes or no, are they able to have just that approved for HLA typing and then the drop down next to it that says yes or no? And then the physician will be able to just select yes and sign? Or is that not possible?
Irvi, I assume they'd have to have their own, they'd still have to add the addenda with their own auto text that would have that, correct? Yeah.
Yes, because the provider is not starting the note, that's where it's they can't go update that field even if I add it in the auto text.
But we could create a separate auto text, like I believe Marie, you're the one asking, like that would have that selection where they would say yes upon signing. Like they could have an auto text for that they would use every time that they're filling or completing one of these consents.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, can we explore that aspect of it? Just because I'm worried that potentially with the physicians when they get busy and they get like a bunch of these all at once, that they will forget to do that, like type in that approved for typing or part. Like if we can make it so that it's automatic there.
It wouldn't be automatic. So let me retract. I didn't mean automatic, sorry, but auto text, meaning that they would still have to put in like they'd have to know to put, as Irvi used earlier, comma, consent or whatever she had that saying. It would be a similar like comma HLA or whatever you named it, and they would have to put that in. Like it wouldn't be automatic.
Okay. Now, with the, like I know we're not
they still
there
have
yet.
to type it.
Like with the form fast, can multiple users fill out the form, or you fill it out and then you put it back? You have to print it off, fill it out, and put it back in.
Correct. Yeah. Form fast is not in the system. It's like a way to print off the form in context to a patient. So it would have their information, kind of like putting a sticker on a sheet today. And then you hand complete it and like scan it back in.
I agree with Marie that it's something that might get missed. It's not kind of intuitive enough, I think, for the physicians to do that auto text, especially when we're kind of rolling out a new system like Cerner. I think it's going to be, we probably should keep something similar to what we're already doing, which is the form. I noticed on the auto note, so the address for the donor wasn't there, but that was just an example, right? Like that's not what we were actually going to be using, or?
It's an example and definitely up for changing if needed.
Okay.
So the cons to, of course, form fast is that it's still going to be that manual sharing of paper within the office. So just having to deliver, which is fine, is what you guys are doing in current state.
Right. What does the search team? I don't know, because I know that Nina, she fills it out in Acro and tasks it to the physician. And what does the search team feel? I guess maybe it's up to them.
This is Charlie. I just think that getting the signature is fine, but we need a reply, right? It's not just a sign or like you guys previously mentioned, not just a sign, oh, done. It's approval for testing, yes or no, procedure or not. And I think this note system misses that completely.
Is there not a way to, and I don't know if this would satisfy the accreditation, but if we change the name of the note to like, approval for HLA testing or something, and really it's upon, when the doctor signs it, that's it's really saying that he's assigning that approval form, right? I
But
don't know
now
if
you're
that's a
confusing it
possibility or he
for,
has to do it.
because now you're confusing it with a consent for test, like consent, like the donor consent for testing versus an approval for testing.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like now it's
Yeah.
two different directives. It's confusing.
And more importantly, too, we also need to know if they don't want us to continue to testing.
No, yeah, of course.
So if they just sign it and send it back to us, I don't know. It's
Okay.
not like
No,
it's impossible. It's just
yeah,
confusing.
absolutely. We can move forward with paper with the understanding that if the system's not sufficient, then that's okay for us too. It's just we're just trying to find ways to get it in there, but it's okay to leave it as is, I think.
Yeah, thank you for showing us what's possible. That's good to know.
Yeah, it's Maria again. I'm just wondering, just because back at the beginning of the presentation of that form, you mentioned that it had to be in notes because it was an assistant. Is that right?
For one of them, so we know that one of them is done by, not by an assistant, it's done by the coordinator, but it's the same position within Cerner, so.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah.
Just because I just want to be really, I think that we need to be really careful with employee designations because we do have like several different types of designations that are able to do different things in current state. So I don't want, like if the search coordinators were able to do this in documentation, would that make a difference to what we're requesting here?
Right now, I think Irby's presented it from the proposed position for search coordinator. So right now, that's the kind of the functionality that I think they would be able to complete. I think, but we can, we can go with the, option. I think was it whatever option, whichever number option was formed fast. But also as a takeaway for like your thoughts and the hesitations around this, and if there's anything that we can improve on this option, we can for sure see what we can do.
Like if you were also talking about like the initial donor conversation that the nurse fills out, and actually that might work really well with this note auto text, right? Because it's just one person is
right.
part of the chart. So
perfect. Okay, and that's okay too. We can divide it up. So maybe that's what we'll do if that's okay with the team. We'll divide and conquer on that one, and we'll say that the one that's completed just as through I think you said through the Navigator can be an auto text, but this consent for proceeding with typing will remain on paper, so into form fast, and then with the caveat that if we can think of anything else that's hiding in within Cerner that can improve the process, we will find it. Does that sound like a good way to move forward?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I don't know everyone else's thoughts. It sounds good. That sounds good.
Thank you. Okay. Is that, and anyone else have any thoughts on that if we divide up that option per the two forms that we had? I can actually present again. In question? I'm going to go with there's no dissension on that one, but let me know in the chat if there's any other thoughts or concerns around it we can pop back to. Oh.
Can you just so basically the consent for typing will be split from which part?
So
I'm just confused at what part split?
No problem. So what we're going to do is this one will remain on paper, and the next one, because it's just the Navigator, can be built as an auto text.
Sounds great.
Does that sound okay? Specifically to Marie, that clarify?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks so much, Irby, for demoing that. Just going to flip through some things here. I assume that this can also, as it's just one signature, can also be completed by just the navigator. So it could also be lumped in with that decision?
It's completed multiple times, so it's completed by the coordinator when they do that consent for typing as well.
Okay, but just one signature?
They send it probably needs to be both, so because they'll send that forward with that form, like that paper form, to the physician to sign and say whether to proceed with testing.
Oh, okay. It's not that the physician just
but we could maybe,
one.
Yeah, I mean, we could do it as an auto or as a auto text in other circumstances, like I guess with our initial conversation with the donor and.
Sure. Like for example, once if the coordinator did complete as an auto text, it's available within the chart for review by that related donor physician. So when they're making that selection, they can pull it up in the chart.
Okay. Now this form it's like as you can see, it's 5 pages long. So we've been told to keep all 5 pages together when we put it in the charts and everything. So it's like part of the.
Document, so I don't know if you want, like, this is attached to SOPs and stuff, so I don't know if you want it in Center because it does have the potential of getting updated pretty regularly, and especially this one as COVID guidelines change, this form gets updated based off of what CBS is doing, based off of what is the guidance from the province, etc.
That makes sense. Okay, if it's updated frequently, that would probably be a good reason to keep it on paper.
Haley, it's Catherine. For the CTP assessment questionnaire, is that staying on paper? Because that's a supplemental, this is a supplemental to that. So it's probably good to keep it consistent with whatever the patient's going to be filling out and then going to AU. Like this is a supplemental part to that questionnaire.
I hid that one, but I see that one's the one that's completed by the patient, yeah?
So that COVID one can also be completed by a patient.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Or it's at different stages. It's completed by different people.
Okay. Then we will keep it together and perhaps on paper for that one. All right. Thank you guys so much for the discussion. We really do appreciate it, and we understand that there's some things that aren't perfect. So, but if we do come up with any other tricks, we will bring them to you.
It'd be lovely to get more automated, but it seems like a lot has to stay on paper, unfortunately.
Yeah, we will try, but we'll see how we move forward. I know there's more to be learned about the notification letter and how it's pulled, but I think that some of this needs to come from a data coordinator perspective, with the understanding that it needs to be disseminated to various locations and some not on Cerner, and it's included in the admission package. Anything to add? I know that I spoke with some of you on Thursday about this, but just anything to add about the notification letter, knowing that we need to likely either keep it on paper or find a place for it in the system.
No, it's too bad we couldn't somehow make this something that was just part of the system.
Right now, as we look at it, I see fields here that are represented within that initial CTP assessment form that I mentioned from the provider perspective. So not to say that it can't, but there's just, I think, a donor ID for the grid might be the sticking point on that. And I just want to make sure that we're not misstepping when it comes to data coordinators.
Right, and the reason they're doing this is because it helps us. So we used to actually generate these completely ourselves, and then they decided that actually they could use BMT Serve to generate the notification letter for us, so we didn't have to.
Okay.
Which has been nice, but anyways.
Okay. So hopefully we keep it as smooth as that. And sorry, does someone else want to add anything to this one?
Yeah, it's just me. Just to echo Val, so this form gets generated when the data coordinators put info into the QO system, and specifically the BC SCIS. And so then when we generate it from BMT database, this is what pops up. So unless Cerner's planning on communicating with BCSAIS, I don't know that this will be able to get in there somehow.
Never say never. I have to say I'm not the best person to speak to in the systems, although there are people that are doing a lot of that work in aside from me focusing on the kind of clinical aspect. So we'll take those as notes and noted.
Okay, because in the past, we would fax this to the data coordinators to give them a copy, and then they would use that to update their records. So.
Oh, okay.
So.
And then we went from the other way.
Yeah. So I mean, if Cerner could ever kind of manage a notification letter, we could just send it to the data coordinators, and then they could make sure they have everything up to date. I don't know.
Right. Perfect. Okay, we'll keep that in mind for sure. All right. With respect to time, I know we've got just under 20 minutes left. So again, my apologies for the sticky notes. For these pre-stem cell transplant workups, I know we have both, these are both auto related. Just from our perspective, I think what we are recommending for these, we've got 3 on our radar. And then donor workup, sorry, I didn't click through that, is that these are really basically power plants. And so they do have tests or directives for what needs to be completed, and a lot of this can't be completed, like being diagnostics shouldn't be completed by anyone but a provider. So going forward, it will likely be that these will be power plants, but the power plant placement within Cerner is kind of similar to this in that, again, Joanne is the best person to speak to this, but is similar in that it has all these, all the potential orders listed, but with the, the select few that are always standard pre-selected. So it's actually quite similar in that. So that would be our proposal for going forward for those ones, would be that those are power plants placed in system.
Hi, it's Marie. But I agree completely. I think it should be a power plant, but the only kind of sticking point to that is that these tests are not always done at VGH. So like potentially the physician orders it and they get booked in Prince George or something like that, right? So I'm not sure if that affects the power plant build.
I'm sure it affects the build, but not to say it can't be done. And anything that comes, so anything that would be ordered kind of for future, and what we are planning is, I don't think, to have your location set to like auto print for requisitions, is that requisitions can still be managed by yourselves and the assistants and for where they're supposed to go. But then also that loving note, just that we don't want to ignore, is that the program has, from the BMT perspective, has said that if necessary, they will keep external orders outside of Cerner. So we're just making sure we mention it. It's not something that we usually design for those for staying outside of Cerner, but with the note that for some of those orders that needs the ease of requisition distribution, that might be what goes into Accura. So yes, it's kind of like the order would place these, and then there would still be coordination on your part required, and that could be utilized from a requisition manager standpoint. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I just need to like see it in action, and then we can know how we can work around it.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull a requisition manager now, which we've shown before. So maybe what I can do is just book some time to have kind of like an application overview for everyone to make sure that, I know that we're limited on time and we keep trying to direct our questions to you so that we know what to build, but then also you guys need to know what's going on in the system. But just as a snapshot, this is pulling in probably what is a lot of orders, so it's just taking a bit. But this is like for one space, you can see the patients and the requisitions that have been ordered for them, and you can filter them to whatever patient you might want to. So that's requisition manager, just as a snapshot.
Just kind of curious. So this would be just for our, like the Navigator, like the office, right? And so when the patient's an inpatient, that would, like, we wouldn't be getting that mixed up if we went to look at Cerner, or if they're in the outpatient department, like the orders and things like that would just be for the outpatient department. Like, does that make sense? Or
So any of the recipient orders, if they're inpatient, would be dealt with inpatients or planned for outpatient from that perspective. But in respect to donors, they're usually obviously outpatient. So it would be for, I think, quite a bit of your work, it would be from that outpatient perspective.
I was just thinking, like, with Acuro, or with Cerner, so if the doctor did a power plan and it was for us, like for the Navigator team, and the patient was in daycare, when daycare opens up Cerner, they're not going to get confused by a power plan that's for our team. They won't see it, right? Or
if they are in the encounter for the Navigator office, I think that should
oh,
work.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have our separate encounters.
I think that's my understanding of it. I'm leaving that to my team to correct me on that one. The outpatient thing sometimes is a bit of a Achilles heel for me. Okay, we had thought that also for this these patient face sheets, they look kind of like car accidents, but we understand that they are completed kind of all in one when we assess the patient, and that this could also be maybe in auto text. Now that we have a deep understanding of auto text, any thoughts on that, or these are fairly dynamic form that needs multi-contributor?
Well, I guess we fill it out. The assistants sometimes fill it out. Does it have to? Is it something that if it's auto text, I see, so it just has to be one person. So, yeah, I guess we could have the Navigator and the assistants having separate auto text with the same information, like the information.
I don't think the assistants really use this. Do they?
Yeah,
I don't think that they really rated it.
Yeah, like it's Laura Forbes talking now. Sometimes we will fill this out as best we can after our initial phone calls with the patients, just to make it easier for the assistants to do their part booking different tests.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's what we heard. So as part of that phone call, if it's something that you complete from a auto text perspective, and then the assistants can see that within the chart.
We sometimes go back and add to it. So does that work? Like we might find new information, or might be waiting for information before. Anyways.
The same person can technically go back and modify. It will show as an addendum, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing. It just shows that it's been changed.
Okay.
Okay. Pardon me for zooming.
And then we could print it out if we needed to keep it in our paper chart, or would we? Something that we hand around.
Technically, you could print it out. Whether to look as pretty as this might be the difference there, but we could try it.
Okay, because it's a face sheet that the assistants use to book the test. Like they use the information on there to, anyways. Okay.
Right. So they have it in front of them and then they're booking the test. So it's kind of if it's not to be within the patient chart, doesn't need to be kind of a formal documentation, or if we could keep it on paper also.
Yeah, it's not really. I think we do keep it because it's an official form, but it's a lot of. It's actually kind of more like a worksheet. So.
Okay.
So may I interrupt here for a second?
Yeah.
Okay, so some of this information will be found within the chart, like the height and weight and stuff like that. So it's not all that you will have to type in. And if it's something, so what we can do is we can go through each line item, and then I can send Haley the information, and we can look at what the fields that are most valuable to be added. And we can, so let me back up from what I understand is this is at the patient level, right? It's something that will be used for a long period of time, correct?
Well, it's actually, when we make our initial phone call to the patient, we ask them all of these questions and we start to take notes, and they might not know, or they might tell us something different. Like, at some point they might say, actually, this is a better email, or please, my wife is going to be the caregiver now, or whatever. We might change things around a bit, and the assistants take it and they need to see like height and weight when they're booking certain tests, and they need to, we write certain things down there because it affects the workup for the patient, whether they have to have a thrombosis consult and things like that. So it's like a working document that even their local accommodation, which donor is being used, like all of that might change. So
let us do this. Let us take it back and let us reevaluate this one, and we can see if we can accommodate in the system. So we'll get back to you about this one.
Okay. The only purpose for this form is really to communicate, like to have all the information in one place that the assistants can quickly look and use for booking tests, and that the navigator can have a quick look and see, you know, that everything is being covered. Like it's like a kind of like a summary, I guess, of what we know about the patient.
And one more thing, Catherine.
It looks like a Cardex to me.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, the wait, on the allo side, the wait's important within a certain period of time because that's how we request our unrelated donor cells. So that's also an important consideration, not to pull it from like 3 months ago. So it's important that that's not pulled from somewhere else in the chart, that we get the most recent wait.
All right, let's see. As always, there's a lot to talk about with you guys. I love it. Let's see what we can think of for this one. But we think it's either going to be best to keep on paper or it's going to be auto text, I think. But we'll move forward now that we have your thoughts on it. Okay.
Sorry. I just want to make sure, like, I think like it's great that you guys are trying to kind of assimilate to what the current process is, but just knowing what this form captures, I'm just wondering if there's a way that currently exists within Cerner that we could still capture this information, but just in a different way. Like, I don't think that we necessarily need to have the forms be exactly as they are now. If there's a better way to show it in Cerner, then we're all for that. And potentially we can meet separately to kind of figure that out. But yeah, anyways, that's just my 2 cents on the matter.
That's awesome. And it's really nice because it's a really open invitation to see what's in Cerner for sure. There's the handoff tool. It's just that things, it won't be as concise and all directly related to what you have here in a sense. Like, it's not perfectly grouped together. A similar thing came up with the admission transfer sheet within daycare. So what they decided is that they would use the handoff tool, and then they would also use that sheet just to kind of bridge things for the time being. So if that's what we have to do, definitely what we would probably do is not create everything the same. It would pull on what Cerner already has, and then there would be some manual completion for things that Cerner doesn't have, like Azolmeds and LP and Fluoro and stuff like that. But that's for sure. I think, again, it might benefit from having another meeting just to click through some things with you guys, just so that we can play around in the system more, because there's a lot to learn, but also a lot to show from your perspective. So I appreciate that. So given that, moving forward, I think we have an understanding that this is kind of to solidify things. So this could stay in paper on top of scheduling orders in future state if needed. I am going to breeze by it, because we only have 5 minutes to talk about final sign-off forms. We have a few, and I think that we noticed that in a lot of them, pardon me as I click through back, we have, package incomplete, recipient physician signature package complete, recipient. There's some differences in how they sign, which is a similar maybe issue as to the consent that we spoke to before, because the options are pretty much the same. I'm just clicking through, taking a gander through this as I go. So we have with the understanding that navigators help to fill out these sign-off forms, and then the provider will sign them off. Option 1 has a similar hesitancies probably as the previous auto text conversation, so we'll go over them again. But the only difference is that the navigators would, because we understand it's kind of a working copy, they would complete a power form as they go, and then the auto text would pull in what they've entered in that power form, and then the provider would need to sign off. And then we have option 2 as a paper checklist to maybe the provider, so on paper checklist, but then the provider may be placing the order in system, just so it's there and viewable from anyone outside of the navigator's office without having to scan it back in or share a paper. And then we have note with auto text complete by navigator. And then once completed, it's forwarded and signed by provider, which again, I think option 1, not to rush, but I think option 1 and option 3, if we heard correctly, might be still the same kind of issues as the proposed use for the questionnaire. Am I right on that?
Yeah, it's hard for me to see it as auto text, but I don't know.
Well, it will be a little different because you will be putting in discrete fields on the power form. So you will be completing the power form, and then we will pull it into an auto text, which will then be sent off to sign. So there are a few things we can do a little different when it's a power form.
So yeah, exactly what Irby said. Once you complete these kind of things, what we say discrete fields, they can be pulled into an auto text or a template. So it would be kind of like a working power form for the Navigator as you go. And then once you're done, it would pull into auto text. So those fields that pulled in, say like when Irby showed you the auto text before, the field that pulled in was in the patient name and PHN, like it can just pull all that information in and then you send it to the provider. So
the assistants actually do a lot of the work on this form. Like it's almost done in pencil for most of the collection of the results, and then they type it up for the final sign off.
Okay, and do they forward it to the provider?
We work on it with them. So there's some things that the Navigator will add, and then they forward it or we forward it. It's
okay. Yeah, that sounds fairly kind of
currently it gets placed as part of like the paper package, right? So the paper package after the assistants, or rather booking clerks, after the booking clerks complete have the package kind of all nice and tidied up, then it will then go to the physician for review and sign off. So, but in terms of them signing it off electronically, they would be able to probably say like proceed forward or not proceed forward before signing, but I think that's up for discussion with them.
Okay, so definitely the preference would be that they need to be able to kind of check a box or somehow say proceed or don't, or proceed. I think it's the proceed without package incomplete and package complete. So they just need to be able to have their different selections.
Yeah, they need to be able to say if they're waiting for anything, but they've seen everything else, right? So sometimes we're really down to the wire, so or something has to be repeated, but they still want to. It takes a long time for the doctor to review everything, so they review the whole thing and just say that they're missing one result or there's.
Okay.
The other thing about this checklist is that the assistants actually write in the dates of all the tests. So they're not just check boxes; they actually put the dates for everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
That's. I think we. I had a copy that was completed. I just didn't want to put it in here just because.
I mean, again, I sort of like Marie was saying, like some of these forms, they're quite old, and maybe there's a better way of doing it for the doctor to sign off the patient. Maybe we can think outside the box. I don't know, and do something different, but.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Well, yeah. I was just thinking too, like the whole purpose of this form is like almost obviously the physician signs it on the second page to say yes, I've reviewed everything, but how is Cerner planning on us being able to capture all of those results, right? Because the way that this works is everything that's on that form gets put in a paper package for them to initial and everything, but I'm presuming that within the Cerner system, those results will all, exist electronically. Is there going to be a way for us to kind of group them together within Cerner, or are we going to be printing anyways, right? So I think that that's the big question, is whether or not we're still going to have to print off results in order to get them into that package format to say that these are all the results that we had going into transplant, because that's a really important piece that for FACT and accreditation standards, we need to show that we've done our due diligence, and if the results are scattered all across the system, then it's hard to kind of capture that. So we would like to kind of keep it in like a package format, I guess. I don't know if that made sense at all. I feel like I rambled.
No, it was good. And if you felt like you rambled, I feel the same sometimes, often with these things. But no, that's I understand. The labs and results will be, results, I think they do cross systems, cross encounters, and so they'll be kind of they can be found in different aspects of the system, but you can see them all very clearly within one encounter, and then also anything that's being indexed within the chart is going to be indexed to that encounter. Like I think our proposal going forward is that it wouldn't there wouldn't be really a need for like a huge package of results anymore, because it is all available at a glance and a click away in the system, and then also they can be pulled when needed later on. So to see
we'll have to, and it'll be good to have the physicians involved in this too. We did actually, like a few years back, like Dr. Shepard wanted to go paperless, right? So we, when someone was admitted, we were just sending them the face sheet, and then the doctors on the ward were supposed to pull all the results because they have access to PCIS and Care Connect and everything else. They found it was problematic because it just took too long. So that's, anyways, that was something we did try for a while.
Oh, okay. Okay. I think I have more questions on that, and I think that it'd be great if you guys were open to me meeting with you or chatting with you again before our next session, just so that we can, and perhaps Michelle can join. And there's a lot to learn. We understand there's a lot going on there. We want to make sure that it works for you guys, and I'm also want to be really respectful of your time. You guys have already sat here for 3 hours with us, so we really appreciate it. I think we'll have to unfortunately call it there, and there's some aspects of the presentation to still be covered. So yeah, if you guys are open with meeting offline and then maybe summarizing some discussions and chats within an email, so then we can move forward and hopefully have more concrete idea about how your future workflow will be when we come to the next design session. Just because we are hoping that with the next design session and then one more validation session that will be done.
Okay, sure, great.
That's great. Okay.
Anytime, just let us know.
Oh yeah, perfect. Well, I'll reach out definitely, and as early as today, if not tomorrow morning, and we'll arrange some more time if that's okay with everyone. And again, really appreciate all your time today and this discussion. Does anyone from my team have any burning questions for them before we sign off for today and follow up offline?
No, nothing for today, Haley.
Okay, that's great. I wanted to skip to, I'm not very adept at apparently at PowerPoint after 3 hours, so you'll have to pardon me here. So on top of the things that we still need to cover from today, we also, we understand that there's some addition of nuances to the workflow, and then also we will reach out regarding auto workflow and the bone marrow harvest required updates and the scope of CAR-T for the future, with the understanding that it's not within your office today. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. And have a great evening. And yeah, we'll be in touch really shortly.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.